On April 8, 2023, Neith Waters tweeted, "People on Twitter, having decorative pillows makes you part of the bourgeoisie. People in real life, hey man, how's it going?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. This is a relatively newer tweet for me to cover. It's only about a year and a half old, but I'm covering it because I really do have an axe to grind. I have a rant I need to go off on. People on the internet, just start speaking like normal people, please. I'm tired of seeing people who honestly probably agree with me on a lot of things unable to hold a conversation that is not alienating to everyone who isn't 17 layers of internet political theory deep. And this tweet is a really perfect example because people on Twitter really will have conversations like, I don't know, I just think that having decorative pillows is a bourgeois thing to do. And it's like, who the fuck cares? I know it's rich coming from me, a person who does a series on one app about posts on another app, saying that you should touch grass. But if you ever find yourself in a discourse that would be completely impenetrable to someone who's not online 10 hours a day, you need to touch grass. And I'm not someone to tell you that you're wasting time doing XYZ, because I waste time all the time. But it feels like a lot of people who seem to have very big political goals waste a lot of time arguing about 25th order minutia on Twitter. Like, there's a lot of people who seem to want a communist utopia that can't stop arguing about what fruits you will and will not be able to eat in that communist utopia, rather than doing anything to actually try to achieve that utopia. Seriously, I'm not even in that corner of Twitter, because frankly, I'm not that far to the left. But I'm adjacent enough to it where I'll see that, like, once a month, someone will bring up the topic of whether or not bananas should be allowed in whatever future communist utopia exists. And it will be like someone infected the entire corner of Twitter with the 28 days later rage virus. And I cannot emphasize this enough. I really do not want people to be arguing about the merits of importing bananas in the comment section here. Because the thing I'm trying to emphasize with this episode is that no one gives a shit. In the real world, no one gives a shit. Like, I'm trying to think of a way to put this delicately. Not delicately, but put it less crudely than this, but there is a value to sounding normal. You don't have to be normal. I'm not normal. I do a fucking show on TikTok about tweets. I have hats of teams that don't exist anymore all over my bedroom. Like, I don't think that there's value to being normal. But being unable to communicate in a way that is quote-unquote normal, in that other people can understand it, people who are not already inundated in the same things you are, is extremely valuable. And I think in a weird way, the incentives of the internet have led people to believe that it's not just that that's not important, but it's actually a good thing if you speak in such a way that is alienating to everyone except the people who already agree with you entirely. And I'll get to some of the fun pop culture examples in a second, but for politics, a rule that I have developed, and you can modify it for yourself and I'll show you how, is that I have decided that I don't listen to anyone talk about politics who I don't think would be able to speak about politics in such a way that does not scare my mother. And that's not to say that they have to have politics that my mother would agree with, but if they can't talk about politics without using a bunch of long words or a bunch of scary terms or without being super aggressive and weird, I simply don't trust them to do anything beyond just yell on the internet. And obviously you can modify this rule for whatever normie in your life you imagine. I just picked my mother because I can imagine in my head a friend coming over, saying a bunch of stuff, and my mom pulling me aside later and being like, "Jake, it was kind of weird how your friend kept saying we need to, quote, eat the rich." And the thing I really love about the "hey man, how's it going" at the end of this tweet is that it emphasizes that the person in real life is much more concerned with having an interpersonal conversation than having a discourse. Because at the risk of being corny, when our days are done, I'm positive we will all remember many more conversations that started off with, "hey man, how's it going?" than some brain-dead Twitter discourse we got into. Like when there was that discourse last week about whether or not Rocky Horror Picture Show is problematic. I know for sure that no one is going to have a positive memory about that when their days are done. And I also know that no one in real life is having conversations about whether or not Rocky Horror is problematic. Like, they might have conversations about how it's aged, but those conversations won't resemble a Twitter discourse at all. Because Twitter discourses do not resemble the way people talk in real life at all. Because in real life, we are not having conversations with each other in an adversarial manner where we always assume that everyone else is operating in bad faith. And when you operate in an environment where you assume everyone else is acting in bad faith, you can radicalize yourself, in a way, into saying some of the craziest in the world. Like when that person said that Israel is the bisexuality of countries, or bisexuality is the Israel of sexualities, that was a crazy discourse, and someone of course did the joke of people IRL, "hey man, how's it going?" Now I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that a lot of people have compared the Neith Waters tweet to this Robert Crumb comic where a guy's walking down the street and says, "I loathe every person I see on the street, look at this stupid asshole," and the normal guy is just whistling. Another example that is mostly opaque to me, because frankly I only think I know what it means, is where Say says, do y'all think lesbian is WLW or NMLNM? And Meep responds, gay people IRL, hey man, how's it going? And I think this example is a good one, because I really want you to imagine what it would be like hearing someone say the tweet that is quoted here out loud in public to people who are not on the internet all the time. The tweet reads, y'all will see hermaphroditic animals simply hanging out and still impose heteronormativity onto it, OMFG. Seriously. Imagine what would happen if you were hanging out with some of your high school friends that are not super online and someone tried to start this conversation. I'm not even trying to make an argument about whether or not there's any merit behind what they're saying. But if this is the only way that you are able to introduce a topic because you're so online that you think this is a normal way of speaking, you may need to touch some grass. One fun thing I found when I was looking up examples for this and I typed out bourgeoisie and decorative pillows is that someone actually tweeted this in 2016. Decorative pillows are symbols of bourgeoisie and would be banned in my autocracy. So Neith Waters was not the first person to think of this, I guess. And look, I know that this is not an entirely new phenomenon. I know that people in the 1800s were in their socialist book clubs talking in ways that made no sense to anyone outside of them. I know that this is not a completely new thing, but I definitely think it has gotten worse with Twitter, and it's honestly gotten worse with TikTok. I've seen so many TikToks where it's like you are 17 layers deep in a conversation that no one cares about, start speaking about things that normal people would understand. But the thing I really want to say is that I feel like being able to communicate your ideas, no matter how complex, in a way that is understandable to quote-unquote normies is really liberating, and I think is actually helpful in terms of figuring out where you stand on certain ideas. And I think it's helpful in coming up with better arguments for your ideas. Because on some level, if your ideas are so good, they should be understandable and digestible to anyone. And on a personal note, I think it's just a lot less stressful when you don't have to worry about using all the right terms and all the right buzzwords in order to fit in a certain conversation. Because frankly, I think it's a lot healthier and a lot less stressful to be the sort of weird guy hanging out with normal people having normal conversations than to be just one of many weird people all together having a very weird conversation that you're so inundated with that you think it's normal. Seriously, get some friends who only have Instagram and Facebook, who just want to drink some beer and do some grilling. It's liberating. Fall for a new tweet every day. Make sure you consider subscribing so you can see the Museum of Not Twitter, the weekly series I do where I cover everything on the internet that did not start on Twitter. Also, you can vote for what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 22nd, 2017, Ashcam tweeted, guys literally only want one thing, and it's fucking disgusting. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. The post that launched one of the most indispensable meme formats. A meme format that truly could live on past me. And I'm not just saying that because I have a generally poor diet and family history of heart disease. Ashcam was just making a simple observation about how she thought that men were way too interested in sex. She had no idea that she was launching a meme that would still be going on to this day. And I think that that's really the key to why the meme remains so funny, because there is no ambiguity about what she means by the one thing. I saw some people on Reddit saying that she was talking about a specific type of sex, but I can't corroborate that myself, and so I'm not going to put that out there. But part of the humor in the initial wave of jokes off of this, specifically the ones where guys was not changed to another noun, is that the joke is that women might think that guys only want sex, but what they really want is true Serbia, for instance. And when I was looking at the Know Your Meme page for this tweet, they pointed out that the first actual joke response to this tweet was actually where someone replied simply, I mean, I can see why you would say that, but pizza is fucking good. I think it says something that the initial instinct of everyone is to replace the one thing with something else. And I think the reason for that is that while Ashcam's tweet is almost certainly true to her experience, its observations about gender are no more nuanced than the poster for the romantic comedy The Ugly Truth. I don't know if you could break less new ground with an observation than saying men think about sex all the time. And so it's funny to subvert that and replace sex with basically anything else. And then calling that other thing fucking disgusting is just a comedic cherry on top. It's just really funny to say guys literally only want one thing and it's fucking disgusting, and then put a comic book panel of J. Jonah Jameson demanding pictures of Spider-Man. Or if you want to get into the actual things that guys want, maybe even more than sex, back in 2017, someone posted this one where they posted an NCAA football 18 with Sam Darnold on the cover. At that time, guys literally might have only wanted that one thing. It's literally been used for so many different things. a chair and an ottoman, a United States high-speed rail system, frozen super pretzels, a Hulu password, and the secret formula to the Krabby Patty. Which brings us to another evolution of the meme, replacing guys with another group. You could simply make it girls, where this post says girls only want one thing and it's fucking disgusting and it's saltine crackers. Or you could say that Canadians only want poutine. Or this one, which is probably my favorite, which reads, dogs only want one thing, parentheses, the hash brown I'm eating, and it's fucking disgusting. It's just such a versatile meme, and that's why it's lasted so long. And back to me saying that it might outlive me, it's because you literally can keep filling it up with new images, new ideas, and it will still work. There will always be a new thing that is funny to say is the only thing that guys want. Like, you could say guys literally only want one thing and it's disgusting, and then have a photo of a Baja Blast hockey sweater, and it's funny. And this is also a thing that you can purchase below. I got it from TikTok, and honestly, it's great. And if you want it, you can buy it. I honestly didn't think of this way to end the episode when I put it on. I just was wearing it, and then it just occurred to me that this would be a funny way to end the episode and show off the shirt, so serendipity. No matter how you feel about my hockey sweater, you can follow for a new tweet every day, and if you want to catch every week's episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing on the internet that did not start on Twitter, you can subscribe, and there you can also vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On June 4th, 2014, fanfiction.txt tweeted, Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Alright, so if you're not familiar with this one, it needs some context. First, let me say that the words Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami do not originate on Twitter. But I feel like this does count as a tweet first and foremost, because removing the context is what makes it a unique comedy object, in my opinion. This account, fanfiction.txt, would post random pieces of fanfiction, usually for humorous reasons. The whole point is that the lines would be removed from their context, and so they'd come off as even more ridiculous and egregious. Like, just scrolling down their page for 2 seconds, I found this one about Zelda seeing Alien Ant Farm performing. And if you're watching this and want to suggest another famous tweet from this account, don't worry, I'm gonna get to it eventually. But where does Scrappy Doo found dead in Miami come from? Well, it comes from a fanfiction called Darkly Dreaming Scooby, which, if you're wondering what that is, it is a crossover fanfiction between Scooby-Doo and the show Dexter. Now, despite everything about me on paper suggesting otherwise, I never really was into the world of fanfiction. Not out of disrespect, it was just a thing I never got into. And so I wasn't really sure how common these types of crossovers are, and when I looked into it, yeah, this is a lot of fanfiction. And so I did what any responsible TikToker would do. I read Darkly Dreaming Scooby in full. It's not that long, but it is completely insane. The intro starts with Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami, and it doesn't get any less crazy at any point. In case you're only basically familiar with Scooby-Doo, it's important to note that Scrappy Doo is Scooby-Doo's nephew, who is incredibly annoying and despised, and I think a large part of why this tweet took off is because people kind of like the idea of Scrappy Doo being dead. And I'm not going to recap in full Darkly Dreaming Scooby, because honestly I want you guys to read it because it's fun to read, because it's silly. But to make a long story short, Scrappy Doo was murdered because he was dealing in illicit substances, and Flim Flam, a side character from the 80s I guess, killed him in order to take over his business in Miami. And also, Scooby-Doo's cousin, Scooby-Dum, was involved as an accomplice. It's nuts, but it's fully a work of art, and I was completely playing up for humor, saying that it was hard to read. I really enjoyed every moment of reading it. And the funny thing is, the person who wrote it, WakeGirl14, is still active on the internet. Not on that site, but she links to her Twitter, where she's still active, and she's actually been interviewed about this fanfiction. Marissa Martinelli of Slate did a great interview with her in 2022. Now, her real name is Chris Johnson Salazar, and she says in the interview that she was inspired to write this because she really liked crime shows, watching them with her family, and she somehow convinced them to watch Dexter with her. And at the same time, her older sister was coming home from college, and they watched some old Scooby-Doos together, and she had the idea of combining Dexter and Scooby-Doo. And a thing she points out, which is both silly, obvious, but also not something you'd think about, is that they both are procedurals. So she wrote it, she put it up there, and apparently she did not think about it at all until the fanfiction.txt post was made, which eventually inspired other memes relating to it. And she didn't see any of them until she saw a meme that put the words in the beginning crawl of The Force Awakens, when The Force Awakens is going to come out, and she was like, wait, this looks familiar. Now, I know that all the Tumblr heads who watch and are always asking for a Museum of Tumblr, which someone else definitely should do, I'm just not qualified to do it, will get mad at me if I don't mention that one of the first major memes referencing Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami is a Tumblr conversation that goes, Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami. Is he okay? He's alright, but he died. And man, the sentence Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami has been deconstructed, referenced, decontextualized, recontextualized so many times. Some good examples are like this multiple choice thing that's he's a Scrappy Doo, found dead in Miami. Or this one where Bees My God is listing all of the best opening lines in fiction. Call me Ishmael. All happy families are alike. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning, Scrappy Doo has been found dead in Miami. Now, I can say with certainty that Space Twinks here has never actually read Darkly Dreaming Scooby in full, because, spoiler alert, Flim Flam can't be found alive in Serbia because Dexter kills him. Now, the reason this meme is iconic all these years later is because people found out very quickly that it's extremely funny to put basically any person or thing's name in place of Scrappy Doo and say that they were found dead in Miami. Like, it's just funny to say Moo Dang found dead in Miami. Or Hawk to a Girl has been found dead in Miami. Or when Woj retired, Woj has been found dead in Miami. Like, these are all super recent. It's still funny now. And I think I've talked about it before, and I know whenever I go breaking down comedy nerd like this, people roll their eyes. But so much of comedy is about incongruity, and there is something very incongruous of a character as silly as Scrappy Doo and the severe crime reporter-like language of has been found dead in Miami. It's generally why it's less funny to say it about a real person and more funny to say it about a thing like Elf on the Shelf. Now, a thing I really appreciate finding out is that Chris has fully embraced this becoming a meme. She posts references to it not infrequently. Like, she posted that this photo of a dog freaking out in a car was her found dead in Toronto. Or when someone was saying before the release of the film Eternals that Kingo was found dead in Miami, Chris said that she wishes Kingo had died instead of Scrappy. And definitely my favorite of her tweets referencing this fanfiction was when there was the meme about Infinity War being the most ambitious crossover event in history. She pointed out that Darkly Dreaming Scooby was a more ambitious crossover event. And a thing I appreciated and also found very interesting in her interview with Slate is that she talks about how she created the line, but without all of the other people doing the things around it, taking it out of context on Twitter, reposting it in jokes on Tumblr, people drawing photos of Scrappy Doo. It would not have become the meme it is, so in some ways it's out of her hands. And that's not always the case with iconic tweets. There are some iconic tweets that will always be associated with the person who originated them. But this really feels like such an organic meme, because it only could flourish when it was taken out of the context it was written in entirely. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention this tweet where someone put a photo of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. above the tweet of Scrappy Doo being found dead in Miami. I mean, you get it, it's great. By the way, since I've fully branded myself as the Twitter guy, I feel like it's only appropriate for when I die for it to be announced with this tweet, but Scrappy Doo is crossed out and Jake Christie's written, and then found dead in wherever I'm found dead in. I mean, my mom would definitely hate that, but I think it's only right. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Subscribe if you want to get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover things that did not come from Twitter but were still big on the internet, and also you can suggest what I do on Subscriber Sundays. On May 3rd, 2016, Lindsey Graham tweeted, "If we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed. And we will deserve it." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where I talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I've done multiple tweets that became more interesting because they were deleted, but I think that this is a tweet that is super interesting because it has not been deleted. Because South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham was not the only Republican going on the record in 2016 saying that the party should not nominate Trump. Seriously, they'll deny it now, but most federally elected Republicans in 2016 were against Trump being the nominee. But presumably those senators had someone on their campaign staff go on their Twitter account and, delete those tweets. And I'm not even saying that this is a Trump specific thing. I don't think it's that Trump made people scared to have ever criticized him. I think it's that it's probably just bad politics to keep up tweets criticizing the person who is now going to be the de facto head of your party. And so let's work through why we think Lindsey Graham kept this up. Let me first state that he has been asked why the tweet is still up. Journalist Jennifer Taub actually asked him at this year's Republican National Convention, and this is what he said.
Why did you not take the tweet down?
I didn't know I didn't take it down.
Okay, now you know.
Is that Tracy Morgan and Bruce Willis? Because that sounds like a cop-out. So obviously he's not going to be any help, and I wouldn't think he would be. He's one of the slimiest, most dishonest people in Washington, and that's really saying something. But let's look at what Ron Filipkowski from Midas Touch has to say. The fact that this is still up is the most passive-aggressive thing ever. Deep down, Lindsey loathes Trump, hates that he is owned by him, but the tiniest burning ember of 2016 Lindsey that remains compels him to leave this up. Courage of inaction is all he has left of his soul. I think this is a nice thought, and I'm not saying this is completely untrue, but I think it is being a little bit too charitable to Lindsey. My theory on this, and I don't know this for sure, I'm not trying to be condescending saying that this is what it definitely is, but what I feel it is that he still thinks the last part of it is true. He does still think that on some level Republicans will be destroyed by Trump eventually, but he's getting too much good stuff right now in order to come out against him publicly. But he wants to leave this tweet up and keep other appearances where he said bad things about Trump in the air, So then when the Republican Party does get destroyed, as he is predicting, he can be like, you know, I was along for the ride somewhat, but I did say we'd get destroyed. In my view, it's an incredibly cynical way of giving himself an out if every other MAGA-loving Republican kind of gets squeezed out when the Trump thing ends. If it ends. Obviously, I'm not going to tempt fate here. Because the thing is, there's absolutely zero chance that Lindsey Graham did not know that this tweet was still up before he was asked at this year's RNC. Because it gets shared and retweeted in Democratic and liberal spaces on Twitter all of the time. And not just by random wine moms. He was one of Lindsey Graham's colleagues in the Senate, Brian Schatz, telling people to retweet it. And it gets retweeted upon any occasion where the Republican Party has suffered a loss in the last 8 years. Mike Schur, the creator of The Good Place and Parks and Rec, etc., retweeted it when January 6th happened. When there was no red wave in the 2022 midterms, Patrick Monahan quote-tweeted it with a Dark Brandon photo. Hell, even Arnold Schwarzenegger has quote-tweeted it. So yeah, there is no chance that Lindsey Graham does not know that that tweet is still up. I mean, it's still up even after he was asked that question that I played. And so there has to be a reason for it. And like I said, I think it's a cynical ploy to have a political life after the Trump thing ends. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, because if the Trump thing ends, I mean, if it doesn't end, I have no advice at all, because, like, whatever, but when it ends, should it end, I think we all need to be very conscious of people that in the moment did not do anything, but will say, like, well, I was kind of critical at some time, so I'm not like these other freaks. I'm a normal Republican. I'll be fine. And while I don't believe in ideas of the soul, I'm not a religious person, but Ron Filipkowski did bring up Lindsey Graham's soul. And from what I understand about morality, the way that I look at the world, I honestly find it more despicable for Lindsey Graham, if he still does believe what he says here and doesn't do anything about it, than the people with, like, room temperature IQs who somehow make it to Congress that actually think that Democrats control the weather and that's why they love Trump. And if you're like, Jake, why are you bringing politics into this? It's like, one, I can do whatever I want. And two, talking about Twitter without politics, especially because one of the main things that's interesting about Twitter is that it is definitely not the most used social media app, but it is the one that is most used by politicians and political staffers. So I think that trying to extract politics in general from Twitter is a fool's errand. But I also think that, you know, we're in a very tense political time, and I think it is interesting to look at the ways that Twitter has been used, both through political memes, because like I said, this has become a political meme on the left, but through actual political speech, because when Lindsey Graham tweeted this, he tweeted it because he did not want Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee. And it's crazy he tweeted it when he did, because just like 3 hours later, Ted Cruz suspended his campaign because he lost the Indiana primary, which made Trump basically the nominee. It was a complete Hail Mary. Now, I can't make any predictions for the upcoming election. Seriously, it is a coin flip, I genuinely believe. But what I can be sure of is that should Kamala Harris win, this Lindsey Graham tweet will get retweeted a shitload. Fall for a new tweet every day, and make sure you subscribe to get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover something that did not start on Twitter. And you also can vote on Subscriber Sundays for what I cover on Sundays. On October 14th, 2023, Lamar Jackson tweeted, Johnny. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and this is actually the first tweet I'm covering that would not have been eligible during episode 1, because I have a rule where tweets must be a year old before I cover them. And if you're wondering why I'm covering a tweet where someone just says, Johnny, there's more context to it, but it doesn't help that much. Okay, let me get the non-sports fans up to speed. Lamar Jackson is the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, and he's really, really, really good. He has 2 MVP awards. He is a great rusher. He's a great thrower. He's my fantasy quarterback. He's great. But why did he tweet Johnny? Okay, the opening was a little misleading, because Johnny is actually a reply to another post. He's replying to one of those engagement bait accounts that post riddles. This one, Wise Connector, asked this IQ test, which 98% of people fail, apparently. It reads, Johnny's father has 5 sons. 1, Zaze. 2, Zizi. 3, Zizi. 4, Zozi. What is the name of the 5th son? But instead of saying Zuzu, Zazi, Zuzi, Zasha Mamet, Lamar Jackson answers correctly, Johnny. Because of course we're talking about Johnny's father. And it is completely correct at this point for you to ask, how on earth is this an important tweet? It's just a football player replying to a riddle. But what happened is, because sports are so stupid, this tweet became a sign of a change in the Ravens season last year, and people attributed the Johnny tweet to Lamar having an MVP level season. So I brought in an expert, Kevin Oestreicher of the Locked On Ravens podcast and writing for the Ravens Wire, to talk about the Johnny tweet and the impact it had. So Kevin, when did you first notice the Lamar Jackson Johnny tweet? Because it's a reply to a tweet. It's not like I think he announced or anything. So when did you first notice it?
Yeah, on those big accounts that generally do like quizzes and riddles, the tweet actually was sent like mid-October last year, and I think it really started to gain traction after the first couple weeks after, because Lamar will go on Twitter sometimes and he'll just have fun on there. Like, he is a very joking person for the most part on Twitter. But really after those first couple of weeks, it was like, oh wait, Lamar is all of a sudden, like, he was playing well before, but it's just, okay, he's taking it to a whole new level at this point. And then everybody started going back, all right, well, when did this start? And is there anything that, correlates with it? And everybody's like, oh, Lamar tweeted this right before the Ravens started to really get hot. And so it might have been 2 weeks or a month after it first started. And from there, like, it has just become not only a local phenomenon here in Baltimore, but like a national thing all across the league.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about how much better Lamar played after the Johnny tweet. Because I saw some stats, but you're locked on the Ravens, so...
It ended up, there were a couple of instances where people, and one of the people that I work with actually ended up like doing a week by week thing. But ever since he tweeted that out, one of the stats was he was like 9-1, had like an incredible touchdown interception ratio, wasn't turning the ball over, all these yards. And so, of course, when he won MVP, everybody's like, okay, yeah, well, this Johnny tweet is the sole reason, because he locked in once he sent that, because it was to the quiz question. And so a lot of people, they were in the comments saying the wrong answer. And Lamar was like, no. Yeah, exactly. And Lamar's like, no, this is it. And I know what's up. And so everyone's like, all right, Lamar locked in after this tweet. So he was 9-1 at one point. He was just, everybody had to see Johnny Lamar Jackson. And so there were a bunch of nicknames, Lamar Johnny Jackson, and a bunch, the here's Johnny meme ended up, becoming in Baltimore and making a pretty big leeway there too.
What it reminds me of as a Mets fan is the way that people are like, well, since Grimace, the Mets are the best team in baseball. Like, how a silly thing like that will become a big thing. Now, I did notice, because the Ravens started off with some struggles this year, they lost to Gardner Minshew. It's not a good sign, but I did notice when I was doing research for this, someone told Lamar to tweet Johnny again, and he retweeted them. And how have things been going since then?
Perfect, literally perfect. 4-0 since Lamar retweeted Johnny. I don't know if it's just this magical thing here in Baltimore. Like you said, it feels like every fan base has some iteration of this, something they can kind of cling on to, some silly thing. They're like, yeah, well, this is the reason why the Ravens are winning. But hey, 4-0 since, and you're right, the Ravens struggled, and it's funny to think about. Who knows? Maybe if Lamar wasn't locked in on the Johnny tweet and didn't see it, maybe the season could have gone differently. Not really.
No, but you never know. And as a Lamar Jackson fantasy owner, not that that's the most important thing, I'm very glad that he retweeted Johnny. It's been very helpful. Has there been any reporting on how he feels about it? I know he's obviously aware of it, but I assume, does he just think it's silly, or is he one of those athletes who's sort of confused by things like this?
He thinks it's funny. I mean, okay. I'm sure, the fact that he retweeted it again.
Exactly.
So yes, he of course knows what's going on with it, but obviously for him, like, there have been multiple instances where he'll just hop on Twitter and just like mess around, retweet funny pictures, tweet funny pictures of himself in like the 1800s photoshopped on the face of him. So he's a guy that like he's a jokester. Zay Flowers even won on Good Morning Football and said, he's a clown. He's, he might seem serious, but he's just a jokester. Yeah. So he knows what's up with it. And I think it's great that he kind of plays into the whole thing.
I want to thank Kevin for coming on. I really needed an expert to break down this tweet that's just one word. I don't have much more to add, except the fact that the meme got so big that even the official NFL account tweeted a photo of Lamar Jackson with the caption Johnny. I just really think that this is a great example, along with my beloved Grimace, of how sports are really silly to outsiders, but can be really special to the people inside, the fans. Because we kind of know that we have no control over anything, and that the athletes don't have as much control over things as we even would hope. So we cling on to silly things like Grimace, like Lamar tweeting Johnny, and pretend we all agree to the joke, that is what is making the person win or lose. And I think that's great. And people who don't follow sports think that's stupid. And I'm glad that I'm on the great side of that equation. Follow for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you can get the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter. Also, you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On March 12, 2019, Screamin' But Calm tweeted, "Me sowing. Haha, fuck yeah. Yes! Me reaping. Well, this fucking sucks. What the fuck?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers suggest and then vote on which tweet I cover. And this is an absolute classic, and it's part of a very important Twitter genre, which is people riffing on classic phrases and proverbs, which is obviously a type of comedy that has existed long before Twitter. It's not too far off from the Jerry Seinfeld, "Why do you park on the driveway and drive on the parkway?" I feel like as long as there have been cliche phrases and aphorisms, people have been riffing and making jokes about them. And honestly, it's like 1,000 of my tweets. I tweet stuff like that all the time. And here, Screaming But Calm is riffing on the phrase, "You reap what you sow." What "you reap what you sow" basically means is that whatever you put into something is what you'll get out of it. In a literal sense, it's talking about reaping the crops that you sow. When you sow certain crops, the crops that later that year you reap will be the same crops that you sowed. An obvious real-world example of this where you might use this phrase is if someone treats other people like crap, they're reaping what they sow if other people treat them like crap. Now, I looked up the phrase on dictionary.com because I have to do at least a basic amount of research, and I learned that it actually comes from the Bible. If this is an obvious thing, and I'm being a bad lapsed Catholic, I apologize, but basically it comes from the King James Bible where it says, "They sow the wind and reap the whirlwind," about the Israelites who worshipped a golden calf. Them worshipping the calf was their sowing, and the bad things that happened to them, presumably hell or whatever, is them reaping. And so what the Screaming But Calm tweet does is it puts us in the perspective of the person who is doing the sowing and reaping, as opposed to the person who is telling that person you reap what you sow. And not to sound like a complete dork, but it is obviously funny to use crude phrases like haha, yeah, when demonstrating a proverb that originally came from the Bible. Like, it's actually funny to imagine if the Bible said, "And the Israelites worshiped the golden calf." Haha, yeah, they said. And then a couple chapters later, it's, "And God smote the Israelites who worshiped the golden calf." Well, this fucking sucks, they said. What the fuck? And so as you can imagine, even if you're not on Twitter, one of the main ways that this tweet is used is to put it in the mouth of someone else or of the person who's tweeting. Multiple people, for instance, put themselves in this situation when talking about something that they shouldn't have eaten, whether it be Nashville hot chicken or mac and cheese as a lactose intolerant person. People attribute it to fictional characters like Otto Hightower in House of the Dragon. I don't watch the show, but because of this tweet, I can tell you that he probably did some bad things that came to bite him in the ass. My actual favorite tweet I found doing this one is this one that quote tweets it and says, "The 70s versus the 80s in Boogie Nights." Truly, that could be the log line for this movie. A modern phrase that is basically saying the same thing as "you reap what you sow" is "play stupid games, win stupid prizes." So someone adapted the Screaming But Calm tweet for that. And that's the other way this tweet is referenced. People will use the haha, fuck yeah, and the well this fucking sucks in other situations. I found so many examples, and rather than run through 1,000, here are a few of the good ones. Me researching versus me arranging that research into coherent prose. Me throwing stones versus me realizing I live in a glass house. Me driving my Chevy to the levee versus discovering the levee is dry. And growing as a person versus looking back at the person you once were with shame and regret. I think what this tweet's popularity and how much it has been riffed on really shows is that the concept behind "you reap what you sow" is one of the most universal concepts ever to exist. Like, I doubt that there has ever been a society with language that doesn't have some sort of way of saying, "Hey man, that's what you get for what you did." And in a way, this tweet is just the most modern updating of the phrase. And I think it's especially helpful because, let's be honest, most of us don't really know what reaping and sowing is. I definitely learned that reaping and sowing were related to growing crops when I asked my parents or whatever what this phrase meant. For one, I definitely thought it was sow, S-E-W, the first time I heard it. And the great thing is, I'm sure that there's some teenager who first encountered the phrase from this tweet. And the great thing is, I'm sure they got it. This tweet really does have all the context you need in order to understand the phrase. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Consider subscribing so you can help pick the tweet I do on Subscriber Sundays and get access to the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover everything that did not start on Twitter. And yes, I did just do the Boogie Nights tweet so I could be like, hey, I'm a physical media guy, no big deal. On May 30th, 2015, Boring as Heck tweeted, "Mysterious old lady flips tarot card revealing a dude who looks exactly like me flying a hot air balloon into power lines. Me. Is that good?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. A picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes a tweet that is only a couple dozen words paints a beautiful picture. I don't know about you, but I can just imagine every element of this tweet. I can imagine Boring as Heck being there, dumbfounded, looking at the tarot cards. I can imagine the mysterious old lady, and I can imagine a tarot-style card of a guy in a hot air balloon going into power lines. And for the record, I did look to see if there were any drawings of this, and the only ones I could find were AI generated, and so, as far as I'm concerned, there are no drawings of this. But I could just be missing something. Obviously, Twitter's search function is broken these days. But this whole tweet is playing on a trope that we're all familiar with. I mean, I've never personally done tarot readings because, and I mean this with as little disrespect as possible to people who do believe in them, I think they're bullshit. But I know from movies and TV that people do them, and there always will be a moment in a movie or TV show where someone gets like a death card or like the Tower of Death card, and the person freaks out a little bit, and it's like, but that could just mean the death of a previous part of your life. You could be fine. And it's like, I know that I signed up for a horror movie involving a psychic, so clearly that's not what it means. Anyway, that's what this tweet is riffing on. And one of the things that makes it so funny is that it's not talking about death generally. It paints a picture of a very unserious and frankly very modern death. Like, truly, I know nothing about tarot, but I don't think there are a lot of tarot cards with power lines in them. And there's the extra layer that the guy on the tarot card looks like the person in question, which is what makes the "is that good" all the more perfect a punchline. You can imagine a version of this tweet where the punchline is that bad? And that's still funny, but I feel like that's less funny, because the answer to that question is an obvious yes, and you can imagine someone who is scared seeing this tarot card saying "is that bad" to make themselves feel better, right? But saying "is that good" is such a stupid question because obviously it's not good. And this tweet is often riffed on with people replacing certain nouns in it to talk about any time that someone or something is given a very obvious warning of bad news, but they refuse to accept it. Or at the very least, they refuse to see it. Or they're too stupid to see it. One of the three. Unsurprisingly, it's been used often to refer to Elon Musk, like this one that says, "Mysterious old lady flips tarot card revealing an exploding car, a rocket, and a blue bird raining burning debris on a naked bald guy. Elon, is that good?" Or this one that references the tweet I covered yesterday. "Mysterious old lady flips tarot card revealing a hot air balloon with a blue bird on it flying into power lines. Elon Musk. Ha! Fuck yeah. Yes. The idea of seeing a tarot card of you in a hot air balloon flying into power lines is seen as any bad omen, like this one where someone says that Eric Adams saw that card when he was indicted. And "is that good" is really just part of the lexicon generally, especially when talking about tarot. Like this person who says that they saw the devil card when they were playing tarot, and after some pausing between them and the person, they said, "Is that good?" One of the funniest times it's been referenced is when there was a tarot card reader on Jesse Waters' show on Fox News, and she pulled the Grim Reaper card when talking about Trump.
What is that?
I mean, I do recognize that I'm at Fox TV. I am a sense of loss.
It's a bit rambling and meandering, but what Jesse Waters basically says in the next minute is that good? I think this tweet is really special because it's so funny on its own, and it is versatile, which is a thing that not a lot of tweets can say. Boring as heck, the tweeter is one of the best tweeters probably ever to live. His account's currently private now, so you can't see his old posts unless you follow him. But this is definitely not the last one I'm going to do from him because he had some really special posts. But this had to be the first I did because this one is iconic. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing so you can get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter, and you can choose what tweet I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 11, 2018, Andrew Lawrence tweeted, "Conservative. I have been censored for my conservative views. Me. Holy shit, you were censored for wanting lower taxes? Con. LOL no. No, not those views. Me. So... deregulation? Con. Haha, no, not those views either. Me. Which views exactly? Con. Oh, you know the ones. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's already bad enough that people are racist, homophobic, and generally horrible on the internet, but I think it's made all the worse when they try to pretend that that's not what they are, and that whenever they get pushback, they're simply getting pushback for being conservative. Like, if I had a nickel for all the times that someone has been banned from a website or just generally shunned, and then said that they were getting shadow banned or shunned for being conservative, I would have so many nickels that I'd be recording this from space because I'd own a spaceship. Now, this Andrew Lawrence tweet was actually a response to these two Christian Vanderbrook tweets talking about this guy, Gay Patriot, who was complaining that he got suspended from Twitter for being the wrong kind of gay, basically saying that because he was a gay conservative, he got suspended. Now, when I look into it, apparently he got an email saying that he violated Twitter's hate speech policies, and obviously I can't comment as to whether or not he did because most of this stuff doesn't exist anymore, but given the fact that someone in the replies to that tweet said that it was time for him to get on Gab, I'm fairly certain he said something hateful. I don't know if y'all remember Gab, but honestly, it was more racist than Twitter is right now. And I think the Vanderbrook tweet that led to the Lawrence tweet points out something that is so essentially hypocritical about this whole type of person. They are playing the grievance card and playing the victim card when half of what conservatives complain about is that other people play the victim too much. And what Lawrence gets to the heart of is that these people know that even if they believe it, their views are not socially acceptable. So they have to be as vague as possible when they talk about why they're getting quote-unquote persecuted. Because they know if they come out and say, people are yelling at me because I said that certain races are genetically inferior, that other people won't be on their side. So in order to get the story behind this tweet and how Andrew Lawrence feels about it generally today, I reached out to Andrew, who is the Deputy Director of Rapid Response and Media Matters, and we had a great conversation. But do you remember even what you were responding to, or was it a thing that has been building up in your brain forever?
It had been building up in my brain for a while, and I had been thinking about tweeting it out for, I want to say, a couple of months, and it just got to a head. I don't really remember what was in the news at the time, but I do remember, like, we had been going through like a whole news cycle about cancel culture and how people were being censored for their conservative views and stuff like that, and it was just, nobody was ever saying what those views were that they were getting censored for, But, and I don't even remember the original tweet that I was replying to right now, but the guy, Urban Achiever, his name is Christian Vanderbrook, who I replied to. I mean, we're just joined at the hip now. But I will say, I almost deleted that tweet, like, immediately. Like, I just didn't really like it that much, and I kind of forgot about it. And 20 minutes later, it's at like 1,500 likes or something. Like, it was just crazy.
Like, what are the things you were observing, specifically, of people not being willing to say what they meant?
Sure. Well, I think that at the time, Fox News was like defending Louis C.K. And they wouldn't say why he was being canceled, but it was another example, another proof point for them that the left is coming for comedy, and so it's that type of thing. I think that, like, you look at the way that conservatives and the right wing, there's people out there that are talking about, like, eradicating trans people, that like want to round them up and kill them, like, and that's something that, like, you're going to get pushback for that. And I think more than anything, we went through this whole cancel culture thing that we went through. It was, before that, it was PC culture on college campuses. It's, now it's DEI and woke stuff. There's always one of these things that they're going after. It's called something else when they get tired of it and get bored of it. But it's generally what it is people just criticizing them for views that society has deemed unacceptable, but they never get into the nitty gritty of what it is they actually believe, I guess.
Yeah. My opinion on cancel culture is that cancel culture will be real when we can go 5 years without Mel Gibson having directed a Hollywood motion picture.
Right. You have Louis C.K. still, like, out there doing stuff. And another thing that, I can't think of anybody who was actually canceled other than maybe Michael Richards, who was just yelling the N-word over and over and over again.
I feel like your tweet gets referenced all the time because people are on the right are always saying that they're getting censored for being conservative. What's your favorite example of it being used like that?
Oh, wow. I mean, all right, I'll give you a fantastic example that's fairly recent is Dave Chappelle. And he came out and he had 2 or 3 specials that were just, like, ripping on trans people, basically. And the right is sitting there saying that he got canceled, but he's got like a $200 million contract from Netflix. And he's going out there and he's putting out a special, once a year during that time frame. And it's like, this guy did not get canceled. Like, there was just, he's sitting there making like $200 million and his voice is everywhere. I mean, I saw it on Fox News all the time. They were talking about how people were trying to censor them and cancel them and blah, blah, blah. And it's the #1 rated cable news program in America. And it's like you have this giant platform.
Was it ever because of their taxes views of deregulation, or what kind of views do you think it was?
Never. It's these abhorrent, great replacement theory and stuff like that. But it's always just criticism, though. It's like these people are still making money. They haven't been drummed out of society or anything like that.
For me personally, I think the thing that your tweet captures that had not been captured before, because the observation that people don't really get canceled is not original to you, no offense. The thing that I think is original to you is the way that they would evade the conversation by talking in the vaguest possible terms about what they were getting canceled for. That is, I think, is the reason why I go back to your tweet all the time.
Yes, and I think that, traditionally, at least for me growing up, conservative views meant lower taxes, deregulation, less government in your lives, that type of thing. And it got to the point where people, when I did that tweet, their conservative views were trans people should be rounded up and sent off into camps, and we should start opening fire on people crossing the border and things like that, which are like abhorrent views. Society has deemed those things bad. Like, you're going to get criticism if you say those things out loud.
Do you ever find yourself thinking, oh, the ones in real life?
Not as much as I used to, not as much as I used to, but yeah, I if somebody comes to me and says like, oh, you just hate conservative views, I will ask them which ones, and we all know the ones. We all know the views that are deemed unacceptable by society.
I want to thank Andrew Lawrence again for joining me on the program. If you want a good example of how Andrew's tweet is used in the wild, let's look at how I used it 2 months ago when my friend Cam was responding to a message anonymously where someone said, when do you become so politically woke correct? Like, why can't people agree to disagree anymore? We shouldn't be made to be monsters because we prefer Trump's policies over Harris. It's not always about race. And Cam said, must be nice, and I responded, as always, with Andrew's tweet. Because you can get in my comments and pretend to be dumb like you were born yesterday and think that this anonymous commenter is just talking about deregulation and tax policy, but obviously we know he isn't because he says things like politically woke correct. The views that Cam disagrees with him on are not tax policy. Last year, this guy Chase Geyser posted a conversation with him and a longtime friend where the friend basically said, I can't be friends with you anymore because of the people you associate politically and some of the political views you have. And Chase posted it without any major comment, just as if it was a matter of Republican versus Democrat generally. But what Chase doesn't tell you is he works at InfoWars. The views he has are not just standard conservative things. It is so dishonest to be like, oh my god, this person doesn't want to be friends with me because of my political views, when you work for InfoWars. Same with this guy who was talking about how his liberal wife was going to leave him because he said he's proud of being a white man or whatever. And it's like, she's gonna leave you because you're a jackass. And the thing that frustrates me now, especially, as these people who say things like this have become more and more pompous about how they're believing the real stuff, that they're like dark intellectuals. And if they actually were dark intellectuals, if they actually were on the cutting edge of discourse, wouldn't they have a backbone and be willing to take all the stones and sticks thrown at them? If I was so sure that I was telling an important truth that no one else was able to say, and that truth is something as simple as like other races are bad or whatever, I would be willing to, I don't know, deal with people getting mad at me, maybe getting banned from some places. That would feel like a small price to pay if I actually was so fucking right. And now, like, the biggest culprit of this is Elon Musk, obviously, and he constantly does not shut up about how people are trying to silence him for going against the orthodoxy or whatever. And the orthodoxy he's going against is white supremacy is bad. But my actual piece of advice is, in situations like this, where someone is talking about being canceled online or persecuted for their views or whatever, pay attention to whether or not they're willing to repeat the things that they are apparently being persecuted for. Like, if they're so right that they should not have been canceled for what they said, they should have no problem repeating it over and over again. Because I'm absolutely positive that they are not being canceled because they think the top marginal tax rate should be a few percentage points lower. Like other episodes with interviews, this one got away from me time-wise, so please follow for a new tweet every day, subscribe if you want to see the Museum of Not Twitter, and just generally, be nice in the comment section. On October 11, 2013, Hodges Boy tweeted, if I pay $40 for a haunted house, I better die. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Look, people were complaining about high prices long before Biden became president. I'm sure many of you this before Halloween weekend will be going to a haunted house and you will gawk at the prices. $40 does seem like a lot of money to get scared once or twice by some high school theater actors. Now, obviously, what sets this tweet apart and what makes it a piece of Twitter gold is the I better die. Like, I know I'm spelling out something that is intuitive, but the idea that dying at a haunted house is like the more expensive version of getting scared is just very, very funny. It's why this tweet has been called evergreen. Why Jawbone says that he thought of it when he paid $50 to go to a haunted house. Or how this guy said that he thought of it when his kids told him that Haunt at Wonderland prices were $60. And at first glance to me, $40 does seem like a lot of money to pay to go to a haunted house. I've actually never been to a real haunted house in my life, like not one that you pay a decent amount of money for. And so I wanted to understand how that money is spent, what it takes to run a haunted house. And so I reached out to a haunted house actor on here named Chuckles the Clown, who works at the Haunted Schoolhouse and Laboratory in Akron, Ohio, and she helped explain to me how running a haunted house works, where the costs come from, and some of her best stories scaring people. Tell me a little bit about what goes into, from, top to bottom, to making a haunted house. Like, how many moving parts are there? How many people are involved? How many mouths need to be fed?
So much. So creating a haunted house, like some people think like, oh, you just do it like the month before Halloween and then, we're good and stuff like that. But like this is a year-round thing that happens. Like during a haunted attraction, you're thinking about next year during the actual season, and people are starting to build things as soon as the season ends and things of that nature. So you have people who are designated builders at the end of season who are working tirelessly through the entire year for the next season. In the all the other people involved, we have a whole makeup team in some haunted attractions. So I'm part of the makeup team in my attraction. So I'm one of like 7 different people who were in charge of getting 100+ people in makeup in the span of like 2 hours. You have all your customer service people, so the people that are taking the tickets, people who are showing you where to go and things of that nature. You have all the management things, so people for different areas of the haunt need to be managed, and like all of the actors need breaks and stuff like that. And if something bad in the haunt happens, you need to have security, for example. So there's so many moving parts, and there's a huge team that, like, even at our haunted attraction alone, I think we have upwards of like 200 staff people. So there's a lot of people and a lot of things that are going into this.
So to put it plainly, like, what is it that makes haunted houses cost so much money, or more than people think they might when they first think about it?
Yeah, so in the haunted attraction industry, and also a lot of attraction industries in general, there's the rule of thumb that for every minute of entertainment you have, that should be equivalent to $1 in ticket price. So, for example, if it takes me 20 minutes to go through a haunted attraction, your ticket price should be no more than 20 minutes. But it also is a factor of what time of year you're going. So, for example, places like my haunted attraction, on our busiest nights, you're seeing a lot more money, and the ticket prices are actually way more expensive than they normally are, versus like that Sunday you're getting like $15-$20 off. So it really depends on, it's used like to help people like go on those not busy days, that way the busy days are not so crazy. So it really just depends on the haunted attraction. But like I said, like it really just depends on how long the haunted attraction is, and then also whether or not, like, what time of year it is. And that will all be a function of how much it's ultimately going to cost.
And what would you say separates a haunted attraction like yours? I mean, I did some research into it. It honestly looks incredible. What do you think separates that from, the rinky-dink ones? Because I feel like the reason that this tweet is so popular is because people are thinking of, like, the ramshackle one in their hometown. What separates one like yours from that?
Yeah, so I think definitely like one thing would be your actors, for example. So actors definitely play an important role in any attraction. So I've been to some haunts that were just like a mom and pop haunt that's like, in the middle of nowhere, but the actors were incredible, and it actually ended up being one of my all-time favorite haunted attractions to go to. So like the actors really bring something there, because you could have a whole haunted attraction of just animatronics and props and stuff like that, and just be like a fancy walkthrough. But the actors are what give it life, give it breath, and things of that nature. And also things like set design, for example, too. So oftentimes there's a lot of people who go to haunted houses who never get scared at haunted houses. They don't get scared. They're those horror movie people who are into stuff like that. Like, for example, me, when I go to haunted houses, I don't get scared, but I go there to look at the set designs, because it's always so beautiful and so cool to look at, all these different animatronics and props that like you wouldn't have thought of. Like, you'd see these from like horror movies and things of that nature, and it's crazy.
This person says that if they pay $40, they want to die. What is it what is your goal? What is the reaction that you are trying to elicit out of someone? Like, what is, when you see what is it that you see that makes you know, I did a good job with this haunt?
So for me, and like what I train my actors to do, is that at the very bottom line is that we are all entertainers. So whether I scare the shit out of you, out of your friend, out of the people that you see next to you or something like that, whether I make you laugh, whether, like, really my goal is that when you're walking out of that haunted attraction, you're smiling. So they've done like studies of people who have like gone through haunted attractions, and they found that like people who like face their fears and stuff like that often report higher positive affect after going through haunted houses and things of that nature. So I just want to be a part of that. So whether I make you smile or whether I make you pee your pants, what it have you, like, as long as I'm entertaining you in some way, shape, or form, like, that's when I know that I did my job.
And is there any like notable story you go back to about some type of haunt where you think like, this is a great moment that I had, or someone on my team had?
I have a lot of those moments. I do like a thing on my channel of like Haunter story time. So I talk about like
Right.
those different stories and whatnot. So like, I have one that's upcoming that I talked about where I scared someone so bad that they face planted into a shipping container,
Well.
which was really funny when it happened. But it was like, oh my gosh, it was just like it's something out of a cartoon. But like, I also have
Yeah.
wholesome moments. Like literally just the other night, I was in this big family group and I was scaring the crap out of this one kid who was probably like a teenager, maybe 16, 17. He had wanted nothing to do with me. He was running away from me, pushing his brother and stuff in front of me. And then his little sister, probably like 3 years old, comes up and gives me a hug. So I had like both sides of the spectrum where I'm scaring this man to death, and then also I'm giving this 3-year-old a hug, and I'm giving her a high five and giving her like a sticker or something like that.
Yes.
So like there's just wholesome moments, whether I'm like scaring people or I'm just like entertaining them.
I really, really want to thank Chuckles the Clown for coming on. That conversation was very illuminating for me. And I think that it was really awesome that she came on, even though I was basically asking her to respond to a tweet that says that the thing she does is overpriced. And I felt like she did do a good job explaining how, in her view, it's reasonably priced, especially for how much work goes into what she does. In addition to this tweet coming up all the time when people are actually discussing haunted houses, the phrase, "I better die," comes up all the time when people are talking about something that is too expensive in their view. If I pay $18 for a cocktail, I better die. If I pay $30 for a derelict warehouse rave, I better die. If I pay $14.25 to see Longlegs, I better die. Also, where the hell do you live that movie tickets are only $14.25? Don't get me wrong, movie tickets for me are only 50 cents because I'm obviously a Regal Unlimited member, let's not get it twisted, but in New York, movie tickets are like $20, man. Be thankful it's only $14.25. And some more specific jokey ones I enjoyed is when the Charlotte Observer said that a 130-year-old haunted house was on the market for $1.1 million. Bart said, if I pay $1.1 million for a haunted house, I better die. When there was that submersible going to see the Titanic that imploded, Ben Punch was the first person. A lot of people made this joke, but he was the first person to say, if I pay $250K to visit the Titanic, I better die. And possibly my favorite one, eBay Jackets and Hats says, if I pay $20 for a male-to-male extension cord, I better die. This is, of course, because if you use one of these things, you will die. Someone with a better understanding of electrical engineering in the comments will explain it better, but basically, if you plug one end in and then touch the metal end on the other side, the electric current is going to go through you, and if it goes through you, it's going to make you dead. And in that case, Hodge's boy would get his wish for half the price of $40. Look, while my conversation with Chuckles definitely made me think that haunted houses are not necessarily overpriced, I do think that there's something so primal to living in the world we live in that Hodge's boy gets at, where you see a price of something and you're like, this better blow me the fuck away, or else there's no way that it's worth this amount of money. And once again, it's just unbelievably hilarious that the version of blowing me away with a haunted house he comes up with is he better die. Also, a crazy thing I didn't know until I was doing research for this episode is that this is apparently what John Mayer thinks is the best tweet of all time. Who knew? You know the drill, folks. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Please subscribe if you want to get the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter series, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter. This last week's was something that I needed to get off my chest. Some people were disgusted by, but I think it was worth talking about. Also, you can suggest whatever I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On September 29, 2012, Taste Factory tweeted, "I'm the only cop on the force who can play the bassoon, damn it. Not anymore. New cop in sunglasses walks in, just killing it on the bassoon." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Look, I've said it before, but it is genuinely important to me that in the midst of all the newer, more popular tweets that you guys keep suggesting, that I show off some classic weird Twitter tweets that were really important at the time. As I've explained previously, Weird Twitter was kind of an amorphous group on Twitter that was people oftentimes not tweeting under the real names, tweeting small jokes, fake stories, just generally humorous things to each other. Not literally to each other, but it was kind of a self-contained group. And Taste Factory, Pat Tobin, was one of those big accounts, and Bassoon Cop is his most iconic tweet. I feel like anyone who was around Weird Twitter at the time would have to put Bassoon Cop on at least the short list for the Mount Rushmore of Weird Twitter tweets. Even Pat himself has said, yeah, my tombstone will say I was the Bassoon Cop guy. But like other big Weird Twitter accounts, it was honestly important for me to reach out to Pat because I want to show these people love that I feel like they don't get enough of. And so I reached out to Pat, and we set up a little interview to talk about Bassoon Cop and that time on Twitter in general. Pat, obviously this was a very long time ago. Yeah. Do you have any recollection of what made you think of this tweet? No is a fine answer.
So this was 2012, and like around that time, there was a lot of guys that I was friendly with that kind of did the same kind of thing. Just kind of, you had an idea and you threw it out there and you didn't think about it too much. That was kind of the beauty of it, you know? And so, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about it. It was just kind of one of those things. Like I said, it was kind of just the nature of it and kind of the beauty of it. And some of it, there some of these guys, Bucky and Fred Delicious, Dubstep for Dads, some of these guys that I was friendly with, you just kind of winging it, you know what I mean? You might have a thought and then you just kind of spit it out, and kind of let it go. And this was back in the day when Twitter had like a limit of 140 characters too. So you kind of had to just like get your thought out in as few words as you could. I don't really remember exactly what caused it. I think that I know that at the time my wife and I were watching the 21 Jump Street movie. And like the whole thing with the Miranda rights is like a big part of that script. And so I don't know, I just kind of got thinking about cops in general, and I got to be honest, I don't really know what prompted this particular tweet, but I know that that's at least the frame of mind I was in.
For sure. And I assume a lot of it is just that like a bassoon is just a funny instrument. I imagine that it didn't go much further than that. No disrespect.
No, exactly. That's basically what it comes down to. It's just a really weird, funny instrument. There was a time, I mentioned my wife, this was before we were married, we were dating. I remember we saw some movie at a theater at her college. I think it was March of the Penguins, maybe. And we were sitting for the end credits, and, they have the band at some place during the credits. It says like the band that performed like the score, the musical score. We saw a bassoon player. And we turned to each other and we were like, I thought that was so-and-so on the bassoon, just kind of joking. And so since that time, it was like, for some reason, that popped into my head because it is a funny instrument. I'm sure the bassoon players would probably disagree. They probably think it's a very serious instrument.
I was actually looking through the responses, and obviously a lot of it's gone to time. But I did see people point out that like, a bassoon is not an instrument you really can be killing it on because it's not an instrument that's often by itself.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't even think I remember what a bassoon even looks like.
It's the one. It's really long and has like the metal reed that comes out.
Right. So it's a woodwind instrument, at least.
Yeah. I think a thing that is really reminiscent of that era is that the tweets would less be jokes a lot of times and often just be like short stories. And I feel like that is a simpler thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was kind of lumped into what at the time people called weird Twitter. And like, I think that us guys that were like doing that kind of, again, joke or whatever, kind of a non sequiturs, that's kind of what it was. It was non sequiturs. We didn't really consider it. It was just sort of like, we were a bunch of guys just kind of like riffing. Again, that's what it comes down to. Just throwing stuff out there. And it wasn't like jokes really with punchlines, but the same way like a TV script, might have a joke and then a callback, it was kind of along those lines where you're kind of making exactly like you said, kind of a short story. And sometimes, people would, the pun, people say that the pun is kind of like the lowest form of humor, right? And so kind of embracing that, people used to do pun jokes, but again, it was a simpler time. Twitter was a lot more kind of pure than it is now. It's kind of a mess now.
Yeah, and this was the Twitter I started when I first joined Twitter. This was y'all were all who I followed, so it was definitely. I think that's why I still have so much attachment to it because I remember when it was.
I have a fondness for it too, and I mean some of those guys I still chat with. I'm still Sam Grittner was one of those guys too, and he's still one of my best friends. So
I want to thank Pat for coming on and chatting with me about a joke he fired off over 12 years ago. So the thing is, part of the reason why this is funny is because it's nonsense, and yes, this is the part where I explain why a joke is funny. And so if you hate that, scroll. But I think the reason it's really funny is because it is playing on a trope that we're all used to. We're all used to in the cop movie someone being one-upped by another cooler cop. Whether it be literally like another agency, like when the FBI takes over a case, or a cop that's like a hotshot that embarrasses the nerdy cop. But here, the thing that is being one-upped is not skill as a cop, not jurisdiction. It is the ability to play the bassoon, which, as Pat mentioned, is a great non sequitur. And in case you think I'm blowing smoke up this tweet's ass, I want to say that Fred Delicious here, who is a weird Twitter legend that Pat actually mentioned, who I definitely would like to get on the show at some time, he called this the best tweet of all time. And it still gets referenced from time to time, like this tweet that says, "I'm the only angel in heaven who can play the bassoon, damn it. Not anymore. New archangel with a ponytail walks in, just killing it on the bassoon." And it was referenced in this tweet that I've never seen before, but I find hilarious, where this thing on a stage says, "If your electrical device, watch, phone, pager, etc. activates anytime during the concert, you'll be required to go on stage and play the bassoon." And Chino, who tweeted this, imagines the bassoon cop walking on stage and just killing it on the bassoon. And if there's a lesson here, it's tweet the dumb thing that comes to mind, because as Pat pointed out in a tweet talking about this tweet a year later, his wife said, "That's a bad tweet, you shouldn't post it." And I can say from experience, the tweets that I think are going to do really well don't generally do well, and a lot of tweets I just fire off without thinking do well. But come to think about it, the liberating thing about Weird Twitter is that there was no pressure on any tweets, because no one was getting jobs from Twitter, there was not money to be made really on Twitter. It was just some people, usually with cartoons as their avatars, just saying funny shit throughout the day. Please follow for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing on my page so you can get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter. Also, you can vote for what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 26, 2016, Hillary Clinton tweeted, "Happy birthday to this future president." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's a little cliche to say, "Ugh, that aged poorly," but this aged pretty poorly, and for multiple reasons. Because in some ways, I actually feel like this tweet is a little bit misunderstood, and I want to get into that, but let's first talk about the obvious reasons why this tweet is famous, why it's infamous, etc. In case you don't remember, Hillary Clinton did not become president despite getting millions of more votes, including mine. She lost the Electoral College to Donald Trump, and will probably never be president unless there's some crazy political conspiracy I don't know about going on right now. And obviously the whole thing with her campaign, the whole thing of that whole election season, was that everyone assumed she had it in the bag. And when I say everyone, obviously I'm not talking about literally everyone. I'm sure that you're going to find someone who did know that she was going to lose, but they certainly were acting like they were going to win. Most people were acting like she was going to win. Hell, I remember a few days before the election, I overheard people talking in like a lounge at NYU, because I was in college at the time, worrying that Donald Trump was going to win. And I remember sort of condescendingly being like, "Oh no, he has no chance." I regret that. I shouldn't have done that. But I think it's easy for us to look back and pretend like Hillary Clinton was the only person who was sure she was going to win. We all were sure she was going to win. To be clear, that is not to absolve any of the mistakes she made, as all of the reporting has shown since then. It's clear that there were a lot of alarm bells that should have been going off to her campaign that we might not have been privy to. But anyway, I just want to set the stage that at the time, this didn't really feel like tempting fate, because it's like, she's going to win. In hindsight, though, it's obviously tempting fate. And to make the point I want to make, I'm going to compare it to a post that a lot of people are comparing to this post, because it was just Kamala Harris's birthday a few days ago, and the Democrats' official account tweeted, "Happy birthday to our next president," with a photo of Kamala Harris on the stump. I completely understand why everyone got mad at this, because it is very reminiscent of the Hillary Clinton tweet, and that Hillary Clinton tweet is a bad omen. What I will say, though, and other people have pointed out, campaigns always call their candidate the next president. Like, "Happy birthday to the person we hope is the next president" doesn't have a super confident ring to it. Like I said, I think this birthday wish, while problematic in its own way, and by problematic I mean like a bad omen, highlights some of the things that make the Hillary Clinton one particularly bad. First and foremost, the fact that she used a childhood photo. And this being a bad idea is only exacerbated by the fact that this is from Hillary Clinton's official account. I mean, I think that that's like the biggest distinction to me. I think that there's a very big distinction between the Democrats' official account or whatever, which no one really cares about, tweeting, "Hey, happy birthday to our next president," and Hillary Clinton wishing her younger self a happy birthday while saying to her younger self that she's going to be president someday. Like, that's a nice idea to say in the mirror, like, "I would love to tell my younger self that I'll be a future president," but you don't say that out loud, and you certainly don't say it in the third person. Because this future president is particularly egregious in my opinion, because it's basically saying, wish young child Hillary Clinton happy birthday because she's a future president. I just really think that language-wise, and I'm sure people are going to disagree with me here, there is a massive gulf between our next president, which is like, yeah, we're going to elect her, and this future president, which is just like so corny and once again just really tempting fate. And look, I'm not going to fully relitigate people's opinions on Hillary Clinton during the 2016 primary and general election because I only have so many hours in the day, but it definitely was the case that people thought that she was very self-centered, that her campaign was all about her first and all that. And I do think that those are important to some extent. I think that saying that she shouldn't have mentioned the fact that she'd be the first female president is a little silly, but this language in this post obviously ties into that. It feels like it's about her as opposed to her candidacy and what she's going to do for people, etc. And no, I don't think a birthday tweet should have that much weight, but You're running for president. Them's the breaks. And so when this was tweeted, it didn't make that many waves because, it was a tweet about her birthday. Once again, everyone thought she was going to win. The only, funny response I saw is that Katy Perry quote tweeted it and said, HBD boss, which, that feels like a kiss of death at this point. Twitter's too broken for me to check for sure, but I don't think Katy Perry responded to the Kamala tweet with this, so we might be in the clear. But as you can imagine, after Hillary lost, this tweet became the subject of a lot of scorn and a lot of jokes from MAGA folks and leftists alike. This tweet that came out the next year was someone who edited it to say happy birthday to his future inmate. Now, of course, Hillary Clinton is still not in prison, but whatever helps them sleep at night, I guess. People have responded to it with copies of Hillary's book, What Happened, and someone responded with a photo of Donald Trump as a kid and said, no, Hillary, this kid won the election, and man, Donald Trump really looks like a Village of the Damned kid in every photo of him as a child. It's disconcerting. Funnily enough, before the Kamala birthday tweet from the Democrats, Stevie said Kamala has the ability to do the funniest thing ever tomorrow. And like I said, I would argue she didn't do it, but I'm also not going to go to the mat for that. It was a bad look by the Democrats. I actually want to know if someone on their social media team brought it up. And look, if Kamala loses, people absolutely will hold that post against her. I don't think they'll hold it against her as much as the Hillary Clinton one because of the things I outlined, and I think it's just honestly less funny that it wasn't from her. But yeah, as this person shows, this is the thing to post if she loses. And I think what this comes down to is it's really hard to post about the fact that it's your birthday without being obnoxious. And that's why it's a godsend that I have a twin brother, so I can always just tweet, happy birthday to my twin brother Michael. And I'm being sincere, I'm wishing him a happy birthday, but people know it's my birthday because we're twins. Life hack. You can only do it if you're a twin. Sorry, non-twins. Before you ask, no, we're not identical. We don't look that much alike. I mean, we look like brothers, but you wouldn't think that we were twins if you saw us. Also, you can follow me if you want a new tweet every day. Please subscribe if you want to see the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a non-Twitter thing once a week. And you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 28, 2015, Justin Klug tweeted, Joe Buck, welcome to the top of the 47th. Sun rises. Sun keeps getting bigger. Buck, yes. World engulfed by flames. Buck, oh god, yes. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweets Saturday, and because we just started the World Series, in fact, Game 1 was an extra innings game, I felt this tweet was more than appropriate to do. For those who need some context, Joe Buck is a sports announcer who primarily does football and baseball, and used to be the World Series announcer for Fox. He used to often be criticized for being too monotone during big moments. I don't know how much that influences this tweet, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. He also once called it a disgusting act when Randy Moss quote-unquote mooned the crowd in Green Bay, and he almost lost his voice entirely because he was addicted to getting hair plugs. That fact is definitely not relevant for this tweet. In fact, I don't think it was public knowledge at the time, but it's just a thing I think about a lot. So the thing about baseball is it can go on forever. Yes, other sports can also technically go on forever. Technically, you can go into as many overtimes as you need to in football if the game's still tied. Technically, you can go in as many overtimes as you need to in basketball if the game's still tied. But because baseball is untimed and it can be so difficult to score just one run, it has a reputation for being able to go 7-8 hours. And yes, I'm aware that cricket makes all of that sound quaint, but we're not talking about that right now. In case you're wondering, the longest MLB game ever was 26 innings, which is almost 3 full games between the Brooklyn Robins and the Boston Braves in 1920. And the longest professional baseball game period was a minor league game between the Pawtucket Red Sox and the Rochester Red Wings that lasted 33 innings, played over 3 days. But what Justin's tweet presupposes is that a game could last into the 47th inning. He imagines the sun rising as the night turns into day, because that's how long the game has lasted. But the sun doesn't just rise, it keeps getting bigger until it fully engulfs the world in flames. This, of course, is a thing that will happen in a couple billion years where the sun will expand to the point that it eats Earth. But it is very funny to imagine a baseball game going long enough where that happens during the game. And I was curious if Justin actually tweeted this during an extra innings game, but no, the day he tweeted it, October 28, 2015, was a World Series game between my beloved Mets and the Kansas City Royals. And no, the Mets just got regular shellacked in the normal 9 innings. But as you can imagine, a phrase I use way too much in this series, this tweet has been used whenever something is going on way too long. Other sports, multiple times it has been used to describe college football games that go into many overtimes, because college football games now go into a 2-point conversion contest if the overtime keeps going. And so it can, for example, like Richard Johnson said mood about, Illinois Penn State went into 9 overtimes a few years ago. I actually remember I was watching the end of this game in the 4th quarter, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a shower and get some groceries after this game, really start my day. And I think I didn't end up getting groceries for like an hour and a half after that. People have used it to describe other baseball phenomenon beyond just innings, like when Aaron Judge was attempting to become the person with the 7th most home runs in a season, passing Roger Maris. For some reason, people thought that was a big deal. Someone did a parody of it where they had Michael Kay, the Yankees announcer, saying, "Welcome Aaron Judge's 475th attempt at passing Roger Maris," and all the Sunrises bits. This was because they kept like cutting into Yankees games to show it live, and he kept not hitting home runs because I don't know if people know this about baseball. It's hard to get a hit, much less a home run. So if someone hits a ton of home runs in a season, that still means that they only hit a home run like every 3 games. It's been used to describe politics. Multiple people used this tweet to joke about the 2020 election when it took forever for all the results to come in. Multiple people used it to talk about when the House of Representatives kept having 1 million votes to decide who their speaker was going to be. Truly, if a thing is going on too long, you can be sure that someone will tweet about Joe Buck witnessing the sun rising and the world getting engulfed by flames. Because what the tweet gets at is not just that a thing is going on too long, but that when a thing goes on for so long, you actually crave the sweet release of death that the sun engulfing Earth in flames would bring. There definitely were moments in the 2020 election when we were waiting for returns from, like, Clark County, Nevada, where you're like, wow, it wouldn't be that bad if the sun just decided to explode right now. And the first time I ever saw this tweet was when a World Series game really did go on for a very long time. Game 3 of the 2018 World Series between the Boston Red Sox and the Los Angeles Dodgers went 18 innings, the game time was over 7 hours, and didn't end until Max Muncy hit a walk-off home run off of Nathan Eovaldi in the 18th inning. I live on the East Coast, I've always lived on the East Coast, but I was up the whole time past 2 a.m. because as I tweeted at the time, am I tired? Yes. Do I want this game to last long enough where position players start pitching? Absolutely. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And I was curious to see what Justin tweeted at the time, so I looked up his tweets from the 26th and the 27th, and when Baseball Reference announced that it was officially the longest World Series game, he said, "We can go further." And he also tweeted, "You. And what if we actually get to the 47th? The sun will really explode, right?" Me. Sweating, frantically packing bags. Of course, my friends. This tweet is really a seminal tweet in sports and baseball Twitter history. Former football player and analyst and novelty Oreo enthusiast Mike Golick Jr. even calls it his favorite tweet of all time. I might just be speaking for myself here, but I think that there is something magical about when a sports game lasts way too long. When it lasts so long that the casuals are like, whatever, I'm done. But when the real sickos, the real degenerates are like, I don't care if this game goes on till 3 o'clock, I got nothing to do tomorrow. And along with Joe Buck, when the 47th inning begins, we'll be sitting on our couches, watching the sunrise, just saying, oh god, yes. Please follow for a new tweet every day, and please consider subscribing, where you can get a weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was not on Twitter. I've done 4 episodes already, from Glup Shitto to Back at It Again at Krispy Kreme, and some other stuff. I'm doing another one tomorrow, and you can also vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On January 10th, 2021, CNN tweeted, "Nearly 4 million Americans have been out of work for at least 6 months." Lorenzo responded, "Why are y'all using my pic? Please delete this." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my paying subscribers suggest and then vote on which tweet I cover. And this one is an absolute classic from the pandemic era of Twitter. This poor guy did something as simple as talk to a CNN reporter, and he became the face of unemployment. This man, whose real name is Tyler Johnson, spoke to CNN for a story they were doing in January of 2021 about people who are still unemployed after the original layoffs at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, it was really basic stuff. He talked about how he lost his job in April of 2020 at a telecommunications firm, and he didn't want to work in fast food. He wanted to keep going with his career, but the jobs just weren't there yet. And like news stories often do, they included a photo of him in the story. And I'm not exactly sure who makes this decision, but somewhere along the lines of all the photos that they had in the story, because they had photos of multiple people who are unemployed who were interviewed, someone decided that Tyler's photo was going to be the one that was displayed when people linked to the story on sites like Twitter. I'm mostly guessing here because Tyler's photo is actually no longer included in the story, so presumably they changed it after this whole thing went viral. And a confession I have to make is, I was reluctant to do this tweet before it was voted for, because I kind of always assumed that it was fake. Like, I always assumed before doing research that this Lorenzo guy just changed his Twitter photo to the photo that was in the CNN story to do this joke. Apparently that's not the case. There have been follow-ups, and it seems like it's not. I'm not really sure why Tyler Johnson's display name on Twitter was Lorenzo, but I don't understand a lot of things in the world. But yeah, I always just assumed it was a dumb joke that people kept taking seriously, and I'm like, don't people realize this is fake? Apparently it's not, so me culpa. Speaking of it going viral, one of the main things that made it go viral was popular Twitter account Jasmine L. Watkins quote tweeting the CNN story with the caption, "Imagine logging on Twitter and you the face of unemployment." And the way that it's used as a meme is that people will use the photo of Tyler anytime they need to talk about being broke. Like her, fly me out, me, Someone tweeted, I got 5K in McGregor, let's fucking go. And after McGregor lost whatever fight this was around, someone tweeted, you right now. Someone juxtaposed it against Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street saying, me yesterday, me today. Presumably they lost their job. And someone photoshopped it to give him a smile and said, check just hit. Ironically, of course, by calling out the fact that CNN was making him the face of unemployment, that only made more people think of him as the face of unemployment. I understand why he wanted to say something, but I think if he didn't, it probably would have just been an inside joke with his friends. But the good news is, Tyler did eventually get a job. In January of 2022, he posted that he got a job as an autopsy lab assistant in his home state of Oklahoma. I've not seen any updates from him since about his job status, but hopefully he's still working there. Hopefully he's moved on to bigger and better things. The last thing you want is this story to have a sad ending. Because look, I've been unemployed. I was unemployed for about half of last year, and it is an absolutely miserable experience. And I'm sure some of you watching this are in that boat right now, and all I have to say is, honestly, you just gotta keep trying. I know that that's the most trite advice in the world, but you have to just keep putting in some effort. I know it's really hard, and I know that people around you are probably treating you like you're not putting any effort, and that's really annoying, but the worst thing you can do is give up, unfortunately. So just keep at it and keep your head up. It's all going to turn out okay. If it turned out okay for Tyler, the face of unemployment, it will turn out okay for you. Please follow for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing so you can vote on tweets like this, and you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter episode, which will be up later today, Sunday, and you get my Discord, a bunch of cool things. So just consider doing it, and if not, follow, whatever, it's fine. On April 26, 2017, Dennis Farrell tweeted, imagine being held at gunpoint, bear with me, by a literate animal, and the only hope of rescue is, bear with me, tweeting a coded message. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I decided to do a short one today because I'm recording this night of and I want to get it out as quick as possible, but this is just one of the best pun tweets of all time in my opinion. And I think a thing that Twitter has always been, in all eras, is a wonderful delivery system for puns. Most of the best wordplay I've ever seen has been on Twitter. And here, the wordplay is pretty simple. Bear is both a large mammal that can often be dangerous to humans, and to bear something is a word meaning to carry something, often in a metaphorical sense. So the phrase bear with me means stay with me. But what I really appreciate about this tweet, and what I think makes it a really clever tweet instead of just one of the thousands of puns you've seen on Twitter, is that the character in the tweet is using the homonym in the story of the tweet. The fictional version of Dennis that is tweeting this is relying on readers knowing that bear with me is both a turn of phrase, but it could also be read as there is a bear with me. I do think it's funny that in this scenario the bear has a firearm pointed at him and is not just, going to use his claws and teeth and all that. But after all, we do know that this is a literate animal, so maybe teeth and claws are a little uncivilized for him. Now, I'm a huge fan of bears, not the category of gay men, the animal. Not that I have any problems with hairy gay men, they're great, but I'm a fan of the animal. And I do wonder what type of bear Dennis was imagining for this tweet. My gut says a black bear, because a black bear is like the least dangerous bear, and maybe he would be the most likely to need to use another type of weapon in order to hold someone hostage. Obviously, polar bears are really aggressive, so are grizzly bears, but it could also be a good old brown bear. Of course, it could be a species of bear that is not found in the North American continent, but given that the bear is literate, and there's nothing about the bear being bilingual, I'm assuming that the language the bear speaks is English, so I felt it safe to assume either United States or Canada. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about specific bears is because I think thinking about bears literally in the context of this tweet makes it funnier, because on top of being a great pun, it just is funny to imagine someone being held up, tweeting a coded message under threat of a bear. There are two replies that made me laugh, like this one from Teaching of Psy that says, this is where the mix-up in the Second Amendment causes problems. They should have never accepted the right to arm bears. And Elliot Ross says, because a lot of people were yes-anding this joke, talking about a scenario where a bear is holding someone up. Elliot says, all these replies explaining the joke risk putting you in mortal danger. And a common prompt that goes around Twitter is people saying, if you'd been kidnapped, what would you tweet in order to make people know that it's not actually you or you're in danger? And I did appreciate that someone, this guy Loops1002, did just repeat the Dennis tweet. By the way, my answer to that prompt will always be, if I tweet, quote, actually Tom Hardy's Bane voice is bad, I'm in serious shit. So yeah, this is just another episode about a silly joke. There's no grand societal context for me to break down. Dennis just made a really good Twitter joke. And I think that not honoring the things that are just good Twitter jokes is missing a large part of what makes Twitter special. Especially in the 2010s, there's just a general agreed upon idea that everyone was sort of trying to be funny on Twitter. And that was a thing I never really got from other social media apps. Like, you could try to be funny on Instagram, you can try to be funny on TikTok, but with Twitter it was like, yeah, unless you're making a serious point, it's normal to try to be a little bit amusing all the time. And if there's one thing I miss in the last few years of Twitter, it's that. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Please consider subscribing if you want to get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter video, which is where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter but was still big on the internet. This last week's I did I'm Just Chillin' in Cedar Rapids from Hillary Clinton. And also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On April 24th, 2022, Dremo tweeted, "Are you ready for your rap lessons?" Drake gulps. Kendrick Lamar breathes heavily. Kanye West nods nervously. Playboy Cardi sighs. Yes, Yeat, they say in unison. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I don't think I have ever felt older than I did when I was researching for this episode, because this is a tweet that has been requested so many times by you guys, and I was not familiar with it at all. Mostly because before this tweet was first suggested to me, I had never heard of Yeat in my entire life. Obviously, I've heard of the sound Yeat, I've heard of going Yeat, but I'd never known that there was a rapper from Oregon named Yeat. But there is. He looks like this, apparently. And I listened to a few of his songs, and I don't think he's for me. And honestly, I don't know if he's for you guys either. I find it completely impossible to tell whether or not people like him sincerely or ironically. Because the way I first read this tweet was that it's a silly joke, implying that all of these rappers who we all agree are better than Yeat will be getting rap lessons from Yeat. Because then I found other tweets from Dremo, a Nigerian rapper who did the original tweet, saying positive things about Yeat's music. So was he really trying to say that Yeat could teach Kendrick Lamar and Drake a thing or two about rapping? And I think the actual answer is that it lives in that semi-ironic place that so much of Gen Z culture lives in and is why older people don't understand it. Like, it's not a diss at Yeat, but it is also not Dremo acting like Yeat is actually the best rapper in the rappers in this scenario. But a thing I have to admit is, I broke one of my rules in the way that I've done this episode so far. My rule is that I will always cover the original version of whatever the tweet is. And guys, this is not the original version of rappers like Drake and Kendrick Lamar nervously getting rap advice from someone else. The original version was tweeted by Cryptic Incognito, and instead of Yeat, it was Nav. And before you ask, no, I had not heard of Nav either. When I saw him, I'm like, okay, I think I've seen that guy in the background of Drake things before, but the name did not ring any bells, I'm sorry. And I think the tone of this original tweet is exactly the same. It's sort of making fun of Nav, but also not like a huge diss against him. But guys, I've lied again. This is actually not the original version of the tweet either. This was the first time it was done with rappers, but the original version of the tweet came in 2018, and was about Tom Holland. Tomato Holland tweeted, "Are you ready for your lessons in how to be a big, strong man?" Chris Hemsworth gulped. Sebastian Stan nodded. Anthony Mackie shuddered. Chris Evans blinked nervously. "Yes, Tom Holland," they say in unison. Suddenly, Tom Holland wakes up from the best dream he's ever had. Now, I think it's extremely interesting that the versions of this tweet that are about rappers cut out that last bit, because that coda at the end makes it clear that the person being said yes to is the butt of the joke. And this is a Tom Holland Stan account, so it's clearly just a light ribbing of a joke, but I'm really curious what it was that made Cryptic Incognito cut that part out when making it about Nav. Did he think it would be too disrespectful to imply that Nav was having dreams about giving rap lessons to Kendrick Lamar? Or do you think that it undercut his actual point that Nav is a really good rapper and might actually be better than J. Cole and Kanye West? I honestly don't know. I don't have a great idea. I don't know enough about the rap world and about Cryptic Incognito's tweets generally, but I am curious to know. As for the Yeat one, I will say, based on the way that people have said it in the comments and have joked about it, I think that the punchline is that Yeat is a bad rapper. If there are some Gen Z folks who are going to get really mad at me, fine, I can live with that. But I really just don't think that everyone thinks this is funny because Yeat is actually good. And also, I've listened to his music and
I had a little off. Yeah, I had to cut a pill off.
Look, I'm too old to be into it probably, and my favorite band of all time is Radiohead, so it's not like I'd even be a connoisseur of it, but come on. The man throws around umlauts that don't belong there like a Haagen-Dazs carton. Now, this format is used often for comedic purposes, oftentimes with other rappers, definitely as a joke. For example, someone did it with this Japanese singer Kotone, who apparently also raps. I'm assuming once again that this is a joke. I assume they don't think that she's better than Drake and Kendrick, etc. One I am positive is a joke is when someone used it to talk about Travis Touchdown from the Beautiful Joe games. And it's been deployed for other genres of music, like Are You Ready for Real Pop Music, Taylor Gulps, Charlie and Billy Choke, Beyonce Stares Nervously, Yes, Addison Rae, They Say in Unison, Are You Ready for Jazz Lessons, Coltrane, Miles Davis, Andre 3000, etc., etc. Yes, Persona 5 OST, They Say in Unison. And then one finally that I get. Finally, there's one that I get that I don't feel old for. Are you ready for your basketball lessons? LeBron James gulps, Kevin Durant breathes heavily, Stephen Curry nods nervously, Anthony Davis sighs, yes, KCP, they say in unison. This is a reference to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a basketball player who's won multiple championships, but is not as good as those other guys. And of course, there's the whole thing where this has led to people saying, yes, they say in unison in the comments of TikToks. I don't get that really much at all, and this is not the Museum of TikTok, so I'm gonna give myself a pass, and I'll let y'all explain that in your own videos. And like I said after the Dior jacket video, if I got anything wrong, if I overlooked something, a piece of context, I'm really sorry. I tried to do my best research. Once again, I listened to like 3 Yeat songs, so that was an ordeal for me. But yeah, please let me know in the comments. Don't be too mean. I really am trying my best. I didn't realize I was at Unk status. People are doing that in the comments. But just want to let y'all know that sooner or later, you'll be 28 on the internet and people will be calling you Unk. So just think about that. If you like this, give me a follow. I cover a new tweet every single day. And if you really liked it, consider subscribing, where you can get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter. Also, you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On July 19, 2017, Louise Mensch tweeted, "My sources say the death penalty for espionage being considered for Stephen K. Bannon. I am pro-life and take no pleasure in reporting this." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. So Steve Bannon just got released from prison. He served 4 months for a contempt of Congress charge. So I thought it was appropriate to cover the time that a journalist said that the death penalty was being considered for him for espionage. But wait, can we go back to that photo for a second? I cannot believe he's still doing that thing where he wears a polo shirt with a button-down collared shirt on top of it. Does he not realize how insane that looks? Anyway, this was from a real moment in time on #resistance Twitter, where a lot of people who otherwise seem pretty sane lost their minds. And they started following people like Louise Mensch, who basically told them the craziest conspiracies that all ended in Donald Trump and his cronies getting arrested for a Russia-related scandal. Did these quote-unquote reporters have any sources that they could share? Did they back anything up with proof? Of course they didn't, but they were telling people who were really worried about Donald Trump being president exactly what they wanted to hear. That it would all go away, that there would be some big investigation that would sweep it all away, and everything would be back to normal. And Louise Mensch was one of the main accounts doing this. I think that she was definitely the most conspiratorial of all of the big ones, because a lot of the other big resistance accounts at the time were just saying things like, Donald Trump, you're gonna go to jail, but she was one of the few who was actually acting like she had proof. Now, who is Louise Mensch? Louise Mensch is a former conservative MP in the British Parliament. She got some fame during questioning of Rupert Murdoch and his son during that whole wiretapping scandal in the early 2010s, but eventually she moved to America, started doing freelance journalism, wrote for a site called Heat Street, and then she started her own site called Patrobotics, I don't know how to pronounce it. But the thing to understand is that she's a crank, and I feel like, and I know people are going to say being too generous, a lot of the people who followed her along would have been able to spot her as a crank if they weren't so desperate for relief from the Trump nightmare they were living in. Because what she basically did was she kept reporting on stories about things like a U.S. Marshal going to secretly arrest Donald Trump and Steve Bannon, Trump's big advisor, being secretly arrested. And she even read into some reports about an FBI raid incorrectly and said that Orrin Hatch, who was the president pro tempore at the time, was going to be elevated to the presidency. But this tweet, this was the piece de resistance. This was the crown jewel of her tweets. And I honestly think this tweet broke the fever for a lot of people. I think that she pushed the crankness a little too far. I think that a lot of people who were really hoping she was right were like, wait, there's no way that Steve Bannon is secretly going to get executed for espionage and no one else is reporting on it. But the reason why this tweet is as iconic as it is obviously the last sentence. I am pro-life and take no pleasure in reporting this. It still makes me want to laugh. It's just so stupid. It's almost like she's using this to underline how seriously she wants to be taken. It's like, I'm not being willy-nilly here. Steve Bannon getting executed, and I don't like that because I'm pro-life. You may think I'm just a crank telling liberals on Twitter what they want to hear, but I take no pleasure in this reporting. And so this tweet is her legacy, and it honestly is really tied to Steve Bannon. When Steve Bannon got sentenced to the 4 months for contempt of Congress, Trinity Vote said, only 4 months in prison for Bannon? I was assured by Louise Mensch that he would get the death penalty. And Ebar Kuzi tweeted, if Steve Bannon gets executed for treason, we'll all owe Louise Mensch a big apology for how much we made fun of her. When the Mueller report finally came out, Lib Crusher fake quoted it by saying that Mueller said, the death penalty for espionage being considered for Steve Bannon. I am pro-life and take no pleasure in reporting this. Other crank takes are often compared to the Louise Mensch tweet, like when Glenn Kirshner said that Trump would be indicted for manslaughter for how he handled COVID. Florida Eagle said this is like when Louise Mensch said Bannon was going to get the death penalty, etc. The true lasting legacy of the tweet, though, is quoting the last sentence itself. It's used verbatim all across the world, like my sources say the death penalty for espionage being considered for Keir Starmer, ... And it's used in sports not infrequently, and you know the Chicago Bears play calling is abysmal, because 2 different people last weekend tweeted, my sources say the death penalty being considered for Shane Waldron, I am pro-life and take no pleasure in reporting this. For the record, he was the only coordinator that was tweeted about last weekend. And honestly, just I take no pleasure in reporting this is a part of the Twitter lexicon. I'm sure that there are people who use it who don't even know where it's from. Tweets like, if not enough people watch the Super Bowl, CBS will have young Sheldon euthanized. I take no pleasure in reporting this. I took no pleasure in reporting this, but Michael Bloomberg has been eaten by a cat. And one that I absolutely have to co-sign, the Celtics are the official NBA franchise of the Federalist Society. Sorry, I take no pleasure in reporting this. I looked a little bit into what Louise Mensch is doing now, and it's still super crank stuff, and it really depressed me. And I don't want to depress you. Like, there always will be an audience for people who want to be told that everything they care about is about to be solved in an elaborate conspiracy that has a happy ending. And the thing I think is unfortunate, and this is from my personal political point of view, is that I think if before the 2016 election, you were to lay out all of the things that were proven to be true about Trump and his relationship to Russian hacking, everyone would be scandalized. It would be the biggest scandal in the whole world. But the problem is, people like Louise Mensch and other liberal commentators were priming the audience to think that there was going to be some dramatic arrest and some phone call where Trump said to Putin, hack everything. And there wasn't that. And I think a lot of Republicans wanted to downplay what came out. But if you actually look at what's in the Mueller report, there's some pretty shady shit in there. But it wasn't seen like that big of a deal because people were primed for something exciting, like Steve Bannon getting arrested and executed on espionage charges, and I take no pleasure in reporting that. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you can get my weekly Museum of Not Twitter video where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter, and you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On June 30th, 2016, Katie Dippold tweeted, TBT to Halloween when I dressed as the babadook, but my friend's house had more of a grown-up drinking wine vibe. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. In my opinion, this is the quintessential Halloween tweet. Like comedian Ali Gertz says, looking at this tweet has become a Halloween tradition. There are some tweets like this, and I've covered some, and I'm going to cover more, where once a year, a bunch of people retweet them just to say, yeah, this is still really funny. Because who has not been in a situation like this? I'm not saying that most of us have literally gone to what we thought was a dress-up party dressed in a costume, but all of us can relate to the idea of maybe misunderstanding an invite, misunderstanding a vibe, and sticking out like a sore thumb the whole time. And Katie, in this photo and in the situation she describes, is like the most extreme version of that. Because she didn't just dress up as any costume, she dressed up as the Babadook. The Babadook is a 2014 Australian horror film directed by Jennifer Kent, and the monster in it, the Babadook, looks like this. And so for a homemade costume, Katie did pretty well. I was going to watch the Babadook before doing this episode, but a thing came up, which is I forgot. And before you ask, yes, I am going to get to the I forgot tweet. And I have a lot of other content to talk about with this tweet, but a thing I do want to focus on is the fact that Katie Dippold is not just some rando. She's an extremely successful writer and producer in Hollywood. And my friend, former guest Leah Marilla Thomas, who is a pop culture writer you've seen on many, many sites, wanted to talk about Katie's writing history and how it relates to this tweet.
Katie Dippold is basically her success with this tweet. I'm so proud of her because she is a comedian and a comedy writer who loves spooky things. And so this is a great path for her. Like, she went on to write the controversial Lady Ghostbusters, and the less controversial because it went straight to streaming, sort of the Haunted Mansion movie. Oh no, it did not go straight to streaming.
No, it came out during the strike.
It came out during the strike in the summer.
Yes,
and then
a Haunted Mansion movie.
Yes, so that it could go to streaming for the Halloween season.
Really smart company they got there.
Yeah, great business model. But she loves spooky things. One of the greatest podcasts, if I can plug someone else's podcast, Don't Get Me Started. It hosted by Anthony King and Will Hines, two great UCB comedians, in which they talk to their friends about the things that they love instead of the things that they do. So you'll hear like Darcy Carden talking about One Direction, and Katie Dippold came on to talk about just spooky, scary things that she loves and how that she is a great enthusiast for this, and it's not necessarily in her comedy world. So the fact that she got such a hit tweet out of this passion of hers and has then gone on to make some pretty like high profile kid friendly spooky movies is just a wonderful trajectory for her.
And I would say that spooky is the right word because it feels like she wrote spooky movies, not scary movies.
Yes.
Now, is there anything else about Katie you want to highlight? I mean, she's had an illustrious comedy career, you know. People pointed out that she wrote the April and Andy's Fancy Party episode of Parks and Rec, which is a classic. She's been, I mean, if you're a fan of anything NBC was doing comedy-wise for a certain period, you've appreciated something that she's done, which should also make you rethink your criticism of a Ghostbusters movie that's fine. It's fine.
It's funny.
It's not offensive.
even.
It's just women. And I believe she mentioned in an article that I'm going to be quoting that Neil Casey, who played the villain in the Ghostbusters movie, was also at this party. So that's a fun detail.
Neil Casey, another great UCB comedian.
Unfortunately, I would say the person who lost the most with that movie getting torn to shreds. It's career-wise. That just might be speculating, but...
Yeah.
Which sucks for him, because he's not bad in the movie. I want to thank Leah for coming on again to provide additional context. And a thing I was really excited to learn when I was doing research for this episode is that Jennifer Kent just did a 10-year retrospective interview with CBR.com, and she talked about the Katie Dippold Babadook tweet.
I think, Katie, that shot sort of is emblematic of my life.
How you feel?
I feel like I'm walking through life like that.
Honestly, that response is just delightful. And like I said, this tweet gets referenced every Halloween, like a few years ago when Carrie C said, "Is it bad to dress up as Katie Dippold dressed up as the Babadook for Halloween?" And Morgan Sung tweeted with photos of her costume, "I hate gay Halloween. What do you mean you're that 2016 tweet of the person who went to a Halloween party as the Babadook, but it was more of a grown-up drinking wine vibe?" But the best reference to it, in my opinion, came the exact same year that Katie originally tweeted it. TBT to Halloween, when I went to my friend's house for a grown-up drinking wine party, but there was more of a Babadook vibe. As you can see, this is 3 Babadooks and 1 person dressed to drink wine. It's just... internet content doesn't get much better than that. Some things that came up in the New York Magazine article I was referencing is that Katie did this as a 35-year-old grown woman, which I respect. She noted that she loved the Babadook, and as Leah alluded to, she loves spooky things generally, so she dresses as spooky things normally. And a thing that kept coming up is that she kept forgetting that she was dressed as the Babadook, and people were treating her differently because she was, dressed as the Babadook. There's some other good nuggets in the story if you're interested, but I'm not going to read them because I think it's kind of crappy just to recap an article that someone spent a lot of time writing. And if you're curious what I dressed as for the Halloween party I went to on Saturday, people who follow me on Twitter already know this. I went to a 2004 themed Halloween party hosted by Leah Marilla Thomas and her roommate Rachel Leishman, and I went dressed as Philip Seymour Hoffman in the basketball scene of Along Came Polly. I have no regrets. Fall for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing if you want to get the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a new thing every week that did not start on Twitter. Also, you can suggest what tweet I do on Subscriber Sundays. On November 20th, 2013, Mike Ginn tweeted, "My not involved in human trafficking t-shirt has people asking a lot of questions already answered by my shirt. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I feel like this is just one of those totemic tweets that you can't go more than a week without seeing someone reference, because it describes such a common and funny phenomenon. Because the joke here, obviously, is that if you felt the need to wear a t-shirt that said you were not involved in human trafficking, that would make people suspicious that you might be involved in human trafficking. It's like if you walked up to a stranger, shook their hand, and said, "I don't have strep throat." They'd be like, does this guy have strep throat? And so this tweet comes up anytime someone denies something in such a way that makes you just more suspicious that they actually did it, especially if no one else brought it up beforehand. A thing I find interesting about this tweet, though, is that it was tweeted in 2013, and it was reasonably popular then. There's enough replies I can see from the time to suggest that people liked it and retweeted it, but I actually couldn't find an example of someone quoting it or referencing it to describe a current news event the main time that this tweet is referenced, until 2017, when Matt quoted it while quote tweeting a headline saying that Jared Kushner said, quote, "Let me be very clear, I did not collude with Russia." The joke here that Matt's making is that by feeling that he needs to deny it, Jared Kushner is just making it seem more like he colluded with Russia. And as the years went on, references to this tweet really picked up, and now, like I said, it's like a weekly occurrence, especially related to politics. Also, especially when an actual shirt's involved, as someone replied to the original tweet with, someone made a shirt that said Trump and Republicans are not racist, which should have a lot of people asking questions that are ostensibly already answered by the shirt. 2 other examples of actual shirts causing this tweet to be referenced is when Steven Crowder, for some reason, wore a shirt that said "not gay" on it, which, has a lot of people asking questions, etc., etc. Another example is how shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russian t-shirts started being printed up that said "I'm not ashamed" as a patriotic slogan. And as Potato Fell points out, wearing a shirt that says "I'm not ashamed" does have people asking questions about whether or not you're ashamed, and should you be ashamed, and have you done things that are shameful? The actual news event that made me want to cover this tweet today is that Trump felt it necessary in a speech to say that he is not a certain German leader from the 30s and 40s, and obviously by having to say that, that only makes people ask questions about comparing you to that person. Like, Denying that you're anything like a famous dictator is only going to make people think more about your similarities to a famous dictator. In the same way that wearing a t-shirt saying I'm not involved in human trafficking will make people think about how you're involved in human trafficking. You get it. One comparison that made me laugh out loud just because the actual scenario is hilarious is when Belarusian President Lukashenko said that Putin is more alive than anyone else. Ben Collins, the current head of the Onion.com, tweeted, "My extremely alive, abnormally sane, and definitely breathing t-shirt has people asking a lot of questions already answered by my shirt." Perhaps the image that goes most hand in hand with the Mike Ginn tweet is from David Perdue's 2020 Senate campaign. There's a famous screenshot taken from one of his commercials where it says, "David Perdue, totally exonerated, no wrongdoing." Understandably, this made a lot of people ask, what was he totally exonerated for? What was there no wrongdoing for? Why do you feel like you have to bring this up? This is pretty suspicious. The thing that makes this extra funny to me is that he ended up losing this race, which was extremely winnable. He actually had more votes before the runoff, and he still lost the race. And so you could make the argument that this ad really hurt him. This is my last political one, but this is definitely the funniest one I found, is that Sandy Smith, who seems like she just professionally loses elections in North Carolina, she tweeted in 2022, "I never ran over anyone with a car, and I never hit anyone in the head with a frying pan. If I did that, don't you think I'd be in jail? All of these hashtag fake news allegations have been dismissed by a judge, and the people peddling these lies will pay when I take them to court." Before this tweet, I had never heard of Sandy Smith. And now the only things I know about her is that she maybe ran over someone with a car and maybe hit someone over the head with a frying pan. Something extremely funny that I found at least 3 different people pointing out is that Drake's song, The Heart Part 6, is basically this tweet in a 5-minute song. But seriously though, I talked about it in one of my earliest episodes, but who thought that the "I'm way too famous for this shit you just suggested" line was a good idea? A reference I don't really get because I'm not that well versed in the Bible, but I'm sure it's funny, is the Vacation Bible School tweeted, "Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. My Not the Messiah t-shirt has people asking a lot of questions already answered by my shirt." A good reply I found to the original tweet when digging around is Yaz Kwan tweets, "I find my quote no longer contagious t-shirt to be a valuable icebreaker on first dates. It might work on second dates too, but I haven't had one of those yet." I think what I like about that and what it highlights about what's good about the original tweet is that Yaz Kwan here is also completely oblivious to the actual effect that the shirt is having. Like in the original tweet, the Mike Ginn character is not really even angry that people are asking questions answered by his shirt. He's kind of confused. He doesn't understand. He's like, I thought this shirt was going to be the end of this conversation. And really, I think that that is what gives this tweet staying power. I feel like the character in it being oblivious is just way funnier than if he was vindictive, and it would be less funny to reference. And it's really nice to realize that inspiration like this can come from anywhere. Mike Ginn followed up this tweet 7 years later by saying that he shot it off when he was eating lunch in his car at his warehouse job, and that's beautiful to me. Because Mike Ginn is now a writer and producer. I'm not sure what he's currently working on, but he's no longer working at a warehouse. And in some ways, his tweets definitely helped him get to where he is. And when Twitter was firing at all cylinders, it did feel somewhat meritocratic, where someone at a warehouse job had just as much of a chance of having a great joke go viral as a professional comedian. Whether that's still true now is hard to say, but I love that that used to be the case. In case you're wondering, you can buy a t-shirt that says "not involved in human trafficking" on it, but I didn't get it because 1, I'm never going to wear it because it raises a lot of questions that the shirt should apparently answer. And 2, I'm not sure if Mike Ginn gets a cut of it. So instead, I decided to wear my t-shirt with the Star Wars character Watto in the style of the Wawa logo, because that's a normal thing to own and have in your closet. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing to get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter episode where I cover a thing that was popular on the internet but didn't start on Twitter. And with that as well, you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On August 15, 2018, CJ McCollum tweeted, "I'm trying, Jennifer." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where I talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and non-sports fans, I promise that this is another one that is very, very funny when you get the context. So CJ McCollum is a shooting guard who currently plays for the New Orleans Pelicans, but at the time he tweeted this, he was on the Portland Trailblazers. And this Portland team was built around him and his point guard Damian Lillard, and they had a lot of regular season success, but they couldn't get over the hump of winning in the playoffs. The "I'm trying, Jennifer" saga started when CJ McCollum went onto a Chinese news station and did an interview, and he said that superstars joining each other's teams in order to get a ring was disgusting and he wouldn't do it. Specifically, he was alluding to how Kevin Durant, after losing to the 73-9 Warriors in the playoffs, joined their team the next year and went on to win 2 championships in a row. And when sports aggregator The Score quoted him saying this, CJ McCollum said, "Y'all stay bringing up old stuff. Y'all got me out here looking like a bitter ex. One of the best teams ever assembled with 2 players you could argue are top 15 greatest to lace them up. 4 Hall of Famers with another one on the way. I'm happy. Stop making me look like a scorned man. Sheesh." Now, an account called Chalk Delight 1980, a Warriors fan account, did not appreciate this. She said, "Win a playoff game, then talk." And in response to that, CJ McCollum wrote the immortal words on NBA Twitter, I'm trying, Jennifer. It is just so deeply sincere in a way that you never ever see a professional athlete. Like, she's clearly being a hater, and he just so sincerely is like, I'm trying to win, Jennifer. People made fun of him for it, and I do think it's a little silly. But it is endearing because he's trying. And on NBA Twitter and Twitter at large, I'm trying, Jennifer became a response to give whenever you want to say, like, just leave me alone, give me a second. Like when this tweet from a blue check account says, if you're 25 plus and unmarried, what the F are you doing? First off, man down, I've been hit. But Rose O'Donnell quote tweets it and says, I'm trying, Jennifer. When this guy Kurt showed engagement photos and said, I'm once again encouraging you to meet your mutuals, Kirk responds, I'm trying, Jennifer. And for the record, that is the poster's dream. To marry a mutual, that's what we're all in it for. Like I said, I think it's the sincerity and almost like desperation of including the comma Jennifer that makes it so perfect to use in other situations. Like when Tej responded to a tweet saying find some hugs, not acceptance on social media, he said, I'm trying, Jennifer. And I do just want to say for the record, anyone who knows Tej, that man is not looking for hugs, he's only looking for chaos. Don't believe his lies. An example I forgot about from my own online life is that I've co-hosted a show about the MCU and other superhero properties called Marvel Cinematic University for several years now, and at one point when the second Avengers Endgame trailer dropped, someone tweeted at all of us, so when's the emergency pod? And my former co-host, Jerome, Black Dragon Roll, posted a photo of him in front of the microphone because we were about to record it, and he said, we're trying, Jennifer. Two basketball-specific references are from last year when Billy Donovan, the coach of the Bulls, was asked about if the team could still make the playoffs. He said, that's the goal. The goal is for us to be playing better basketball. I've still got a lot of belief in the group because of who they are. Someone quote-tweeted that with a photo of him and made it seem like he was saying, I'm trying, Jennifer. Because honestly, the quote has that energy. And during Team USA pre-Olympics practice this summer, there was a photo of Anthony Edwards dunking on Kevin Durant that went viral, and Kevin Durant quote tweeted it because he's the most online person ever to play a professional sport with, I tried, Jennifer. If you're wondering how this saga turned out for CJ McCollum, did he ever win a playoff game? The good news is he actually won 2 playoff series the very next year. And actually, after CJ McCollum's first career playoff win, ESPN's Royce Young asked him if he had anything to say to Jennifer, and this is how he responded.
Royce Young, ESPN.com. CJ, do you have anything you'd like to say to Jennifer?
No, man. I appreciate her. She's probably a nice young lady.
I want to say he was annoyed by the question, but he might just have a weird laugh. Speaking of that nice young lady, though, the Trailblazers ended up playing the Golden State Warriors after they won the first 2 series. And like I mentioned, Jennifer is a Warriors fan, so she was able to go to the first game of the series, where she met CJ McCollum. Like I said, I think the I'm trying Jennifer thing makes CJ McCollum look better. He's a really honest guy in the media, and I really appreciate him for that. And I like when Twitter is a place for athletes to be more honest and open instead of being a place to, like, grow their brand and do an ad for something no one cares about. Like, I think anyone who is on any sports Twitter will tell you that it has gotten demonstrably worse now that every athlete uses every social media site as an extension of their brand. And I think that a brand, like literally a brand, and trying to sell something, becomes the death of interesting stuff on social media. And so no brand would tell CJ McCollum to tweet, I'm trying Jennifer, and I'm glad he did. And so to everyone out there who wants to tell people like, hey, I'm trying, just give me a chance, do it. You might get clowned a little bit, but ultimately you'll win that playoff game, you'll win that playoff series, and people will just remember it as a meme. They won't remember it as a thing to make fun of you by. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing. We get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter but is nonetheless popular on the internet, and you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 30th, 2021, Todd Kramer tweeted, I've been hacked. All my apes gone. This just sold. Please help me. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers select which tweet I cover, and this one is a classic. And I just want to say, if you're concerned I'm going to spend this entire video making fun of the concept of NFTs, you don't have to worry. I'm only going to spend a lot of it doing that. Because this tweet went viral for multiple reasons. I think the most obvious is because of the way it's written, the way that it's missing words, how silly I've been hacked, all my apes gone sounds. Especially because if you're someone who doesn't know much about NFTs, the apes part is completely confusing. Now, because I'm extremely online, I know that he's referring to ape NFTs in the Bored Ape Yacht Club. This was a collection of NFTs that were randomly generated, and having them allowed you to get into a certain club, and you could use them as your profile picture. Honestly, it's all pretty silly. And this Todd Kramer fella, who apparently is a professional art dealer in New York, had, as Vice reported, about $2.3 million worth of Bored Apes in his wallet, and it was stolen. His problem was that he had these apes in an open sea wallet as opposed to a private wallet. In layman's terms, he kept $2.3 million worth of art in a really unsecure location. But the fact that he went on Twitter to complain and try to get the apes back is what makes this to me deeply funny, as opposed to just, oh, it's silly that he forgot some words and was talking about apes. Because the entire point, as far as I understood it, of crypto and NFT is that there is no central authority controlling all of it. In theory, having no one to go to if something gets stolen is the trade-off you make for not having a centralized organization. OpenSea eventually capitulated and froze all transactions using those stolen apes, which left some NFT people to be pretty upset, because that's, again, against the whole point. And the funny thing that kept happening during the heyday of crypto and NFTs is that they constantly were making the point of why a centralized banking system, while flawed, has its benefits. Personally, I sleep easier knowing that even if someone does steal my banking information, they can't take all of my money and leave me with no recourse of what to do. And this being about NFTs is even sillier to me, because if we're going to stipulate that NFTs are art, which I'm stipulating for the purposes of this point, it's not a thing I believe, but if we were to stipulate that they're art, in the real world, if someone breaks into your house and steals art off of your wall, that is a crime, and there are people who investigate it and try to get that art back to you. And the dumbest thing of all, in my opinion, is that the thing that was stolen was not even like a copy of the ape. It was just some record that the ape belonged to whoever stole it. And this led to a great response from this guy Adam, who says, "Wow, that's so shitty. I'm really sorry, dude, but please change your PFP since you no longer own it." And to me, this highlights why the NFT phenomenon was so silly to begin with. Because of course he doesn't have to change his profile photo at all, because his ownership of that image in the real world did not meaningfully change at all. The same way that anyone could have right-clicked on his profile photo, saved it, and made it their own profile photo, nothing is making him change it now. And so as you can imagine, other NFT and crypto skeptics like myself use this tweet as a way to make fun of NFT people. Ben Collins, CEO of The Onion, who I actually just recently featured in yesterday's episode, said that he tried to explain the all apes gone phenomenon to a regular person and it wasn't going well. And what he pointed out is that one thing I've learned covering bad stuff on the internet for years is when you go to explain it in real life, no matter what, you sound equally, if not more deranged than the people buying a JPEG of an ape wearing a hat with a propeller on it for the price of 6 Lamborghinis. At the height of NFTs, I just saw so many people try to come up with use cases for them. You know, things that made some sense that I could somewhat understand. But the reality of what was actually happening in the world of NFTs is that people were spending millions of dollars on cartoon drawings of apes. And so yeah, I can't say I'm surprised that by July 2023, the floor price of Bored Ape NFTs had decreased 88% from its April 2022 peak. As for the original specific tweet, people made fun of it in a myriad of ways. They did things like post the clip from Rise of the Planet of the Apes where apes are jumping out of windows with the caption, "All my apes gone." They put the tweet on the cover of the PlayStation game Ape Escape. They erased all the apes from the classic evolutionary chart from apes to man and said, "All my apes gone." And after this tweet became a laughingstock, Gators After Dark tweeted, "You're laughing. He just lost all his apes and you're laughing?" My personal favorite is when someone made a parody of California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas, where it was instead, "All my apes are gone, and the sky is gray, and the sky is gray." And it even inspired references to some of the oldest memes on the internet, like "all your apes are belong to us." Like I alluded to earlier, I think the fact that people were just waiting for something to pounce on in regards to making fun of NFTs is why this took on a life of its own. And I think what makes this tweet the perfect target is that it lays bare the main things that people were making fun of NFTs about. That it was cartoon apes, that it was easy to hack, and that people who are into it were completely out of touch with the rest of the world. And as I once tweeted, I believe putting all my money in fungible tokens. That's right, Chuck E. Cheese coins. Take that, Crypto.com. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and like I said, if you subscribe, you can help select the next Subscriber Sunday tweet, and you can see the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly series where I cover a thing on the internet that didn't start on Twitter. On November 5th, 2020, Donald Trump tweeted, "Stop the count." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I was going to do this tweet on Election Day itself, but I realized it was probably a good idea to do it while people still have a chance to vote. Because I think it's important for us to remember that just 4 years ago, when we had an election, the president got on Twitter and was telling election officials to stop counting legal votes. Because for those who don't remember, or people who are teenagers and weren't really plugged in, because the thing is, if you're voting this year, you could have been as young as 14 when this all happened, the states of specifically Pennsylvania and Michigan were still counting their votes as the days went on after Election Day, because they have laws where absentee ballots can't get counted until election day. And since they need to be verified with signatures and stuff like that, it can take some time. And it obviously took a much longer time in 2020 because we had more absentee ballots than ever, because I don't know if you remember, there was the novel coronavirus pandemic. And since the whole pandemic's existence became a political issue, Democrats were much more likely to vote absentee than Republicans. So therefore, the original election day votes, which are counted first, were much more Republican than the absentee votes. And since the election day votes are counted first, it looked like Republicans had a big lead in Pennsylvania and Michigan and even Wisconsin to another extent. But we all knew this was going to happen. This was a thing that we were all supposed to be prepared for. I was prepared for. I knew that the election day results were going to be redder than the final results. And as absentee ballots started to get counted and we started to get ballot drops, Trump's margin in Pennsylvania and Michigan kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and it eventually got to the point where while networks couldn't quite call it, it was pretty clear he would end up losing those states by several thousand votes. And this became clear to him as well. He did not want all these absentee ballots to be counted because he was in the lead at the time, and he knew if all the ballots were counted, he would be losing. And so he tweeted, and he also tried to get election officials to do this behind the scenes. These are things we know. He tweeted that he wanted people to stop the count. And the thing I have to emphasize is that people around Trump knew that this phenomenon was going to happen. They knew that there would be what they call a red mirage. Him saying stop the count is not him actually believing that there is malfeasance going on. He just wants the count to stop because he knows that the other votes that have yet to be counted are more Democrat than they are Republican. And as this was happening, there were hordes of people going to election offices in places like Michigan, literally yelling the words stop the count. Stop the count! Stop the If you see that video and think, wow, that seems really undemocratic and something that is scary and should not happen in a free country, I agree. And if you're thinking this is certainly not the type of behavior that a president and someone who's looking for re-election should be encouraging, I also agree. And while I understand why Stop the Count became a meme, and I'm going to show a bunch of examples of being used as a meme, I don't think that enough of us have sat with the fact that the sitting president was calling for people to lose the franchise. That's what he was doing. Because these are all people who were told by their state governments control elections, that they would legally be able to vote absentee. Not all of them are Democrats. There were votes for Trump in these baskets. And he was saying that because he didn't like the general direction that the votes were going, that the people whose votes had not yet been counted, they did not deserve the right to vote. That's what he was saying. Because if you cast a vote and that vote is not counted for illegitimate reasons, you effectively have lost the right to vote. And I know that this rhetorical device is somewhat problematic because it otherizes other countries. But let's be honest here. If the president of a country in, say, South America were to be leading, but there were some more votes that needed to be counted that were going to go against him, and he were to tweet, stop the count, everyone would be like, oh, this is an attempt at an authoritarian takeover. This is clearly not a legitimate democracy. We know what's going on here. I'm sure the handful of people who still follow me who don't realize that I despise Donald Trump and will take any opportunity I can to say something bad about him are going to be mad about this episode. But, I really think that he is a threat to democracy, and I think that this tweet, as funny as it is to reference, is Exhibit A. He was telling people to not count legitimate votes from American citizens. It does not get any more clear-cut anti-democracy than that. And the funniest thing about Trump tweeting this is that while states like Pennsylvania and Michigan count their election day votes first and then their absentee votes second, that's not the way that every state does it. Arizona and Nevada, for example, do it the opposite way. So in those states, Biden was up really big, and Biden's margin was shrinking as more votes were counted. So if they stopped the count there, as Nate Cohn points out, Biden would win because that would give him over 270 electoral votes. So it was a lot harder to take Trump's argument seriously when his argument was stop the count in Michigan and Pennsylvania, but no, keep counting in Arizona and Nevada. Of course, they didn't stop the count, and eventually Biden won, and that was the end of Trump trying to overturn the election. Oh, what's that? All right, let's get to the examples of it being used in other contexts. It's been used even right now in this election when there were some polls about early voting. Andrew Lawrence, who I previously had on the show, saw those polls where Harris was up a lot in early vote and said, stop the count. I just saw it used in reference to the presidential election going on in Moldova. And I even saw a tweet where someone said, stop the count, about an election for mayor in a Chilean town called Ñuñoa. And apparently the guy in second in this graphic ended up winning, so they didn't stop the count. It's used often with Twitter polls, like this person, I guess, was doing a bracket of some kind of Pedro Pascal characters, and it was Oberyn Martell versus Marcus Marcus Pike, and with Oberyn out to a big lead, Eno said, "Stop the count." And when Rap House TV asked, "Do y'all think Melly can beat his case? Is he innocent?" After one vote, that was no, Glass Cleaner said, "Stop the count." The place I see "Stop the count" most frequently, just because of my interests, is on sports Twitter. My friend Jordan tweeted "Stop the count" when USF got out to a 3-point lead on Alabama this year, a game that they ended up losing by a lot. This last weekend, Reddit FCS tweeted "Stop the count" when Maine, an FCS team, a lower level team, was up 7-0 on Oklahoma, an FBS team, a higher level team. They also lost that game by a lot. And the thing that's astounding is that people started making "Stop the count" jokes about sports almost instantly. This tweet is from November 6th, the day after Trump tweeted "Stop the count." This guy, AJ, said "Stop the count" about the table for the Primeira Liga, Portugal's soccer league, because Sporting was ahead, and I guess he's a Sporting fan, and he said "Stop the count." Literally less than 48 hours after Trump tweeted "Stop the count," this guy was like, "I'm gonna apply this to Portuguese soccer." And so yeah, I understand why this became a meme. I've used it as a meme before. I think it's very funny to say "Stop the count" about things that are not that serious. But I also don't want it being used in an unserious context to distract from how serious it actually was. I know I spent the first 3.5 minutes making that point, but I want to underline it, because I know people are going to get very annoyed that me, the random Twitter guy, is basically saying who you should vote for president. But I think that the behavior that "Stop the count" is a part of is completely disqualifying. And because I think it's disqualifying for democracy, because I think that electing that again is a threat to democracy, I find it much more important to say that out loud on the platform that I have than I do about not offending anyone. I don't know. There are lots of reasons why I can't stand Donald Trump. There are a lot of reasons why I voted for Kamala Harris. But I think it really is as simple as if one candidate does not respect democracy and is willing to throw out votes in order to get a victory, then that candidate should never be able to win again. And if you disagree on that, then I fundamentally don't think you have a commitment to democracy, and I don't really care what you have to say. So yeah, I'm not going to make any predictions because I don't want to look stupid on Wednesday, and I'm sure that if he wins, then there'll be people who eventually find this video who make fun of me, and that's fine. But I hope that it all works out the way I want it to. I hope she wins, I'm not gonna lie. And I hope if he wins, I hope I'm wrong about everything. I hope that I have Trump derangement syndrome. I hope that I'm making it up in my head that he says he wants to, assassinate journalists and political enemies. I hope that I'm wrong about him deporting people and separating families. I hope I'm wrong about all the things I'm worried about with him. I really do. I don't want those things to happen. But most of all, I hope she wins so I don't have to worry about any of that. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Please subscribe if you want to see the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly series where I cover something that did not start on Twitter. And also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. And more important than that, vote generally if you live in the United States, especially if you're young, if you think that your vote doesn't matter. I promise your vote does matter. And I promise that you're going to want to vote in a way that allows you to vote more in the future. On June 8th, 2015, Billy Ray Cyrus tweeted, "Much to think about." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. As an American, I feel like we all have much to think about today, so I thought this tweet was only appropriate. When I covered Billy Ray Cyrus's "What to Heck" tweet a couple months ago, everyone was asking, are you going to do much to think about? And of course I'm going to do much to think about. I would be derelict of duty as the curator of the Museum of Twitter if I did not do much to think about. Because this post is just perfect. Billy Ray simultaneously looks like he's thinking about a lot and thinking about nothing at all. It's unclear if this is a selfie, maybe his one arm could be hooked around taking a selfie, or did he ask someone to take a photo of him deep in thought? Neither possibility is particularly good, because on the one hand, he asks someone, a friend, maybe someone who works for him, "Hey, do you mind taking a photo of me while I squat down deep in thought on my driveway?" And on the other hand, he could have thought to himself, Billy Ray Cyrus, a multimillionaire recording artist and actor, "I'm gonna squat on my driveway and take a photo of myself deep in thought." There's just something so funny about a country star in his 50s tweeting this photo out. Because really, if I were to tell you someone were to post a photo of themselves, looking down to the side, with the sun shining behind them, and the caption, "Much to think about," you'd be much more likely to think that's a teenage girl than a country music star in his 50s. But look, I don't want to be a gender essentialist. There's nothing wrong with a country music star in his 50s posting the selfie. It's just a little funny. There's a great piece in The Cut from Claire Lampin where she talks about how much she thinks about this tweet. That was very helpful. I'm not going to quote from it a ton because I want y'all to read it, but a thing that she points out is that nothing really major happened in Billy Ray Cyrus's life on this date. The only thing she could find is that Miley Cyrus had an interview and a photo spread in Paper Magazine, which I actually can't find anymore. I guess it's been taken off the internet. But even that didn't seem like it'd be a thing that he'd be thinking about. So whatever the much was that he had to think about, it's not fit for public consumption. Another thing I found interesting that I learned from this article is that this post was also posted on Facebook at the exact same time. Now, as you know, in order for a tweet to qualify for this series, it must originate on Twitter, but since it went on Twitter and Facebook at the same time, I'm counting it. I do just love that Billy Ray Cyrus was like, you know what? 2 different platforms need to know that I'm thinking about something. And the way that this post really took off and is still used today is by people using this photo and the much to think about caption as a way of describing how they're currently feeling. Like this account Brighton Girl Problems, which I'm assuming is about girls in the English city of Brighton. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brits. Anyway, me when I wake up and I've drunk texted 97 boys, lost my bank card, ruined every single friendship I have, and I'm spooning a leftover kebab. Understandably, she has much to think about, like why she pronounces kebab like that. Antonio here had much to think about when he saw Avengers Endgame. I had much to think about coming out of that movie as well. Like, did Joe Russo really make a big deal about casting himself as the first gay character in the MCU when all he really did was just mention offhandedly going on a date with a man? It's even been used in other languages, like this tweet which effectively says me thinking about what I'm going to do in 2019. Don't worry, I'm not going to butcher the Spanish pronunciation. And it can be used literally, like when Emily here says me when the restaurant has more than one vegan option, she's thinking, much to think about. Sometimes it's referenced without even the photo, like here where LeBron James said, I got a lot to think about, just personally, with me moving forward, with the game of basketball, I got a lot to think about. Sailor says, the Billy Ray Cyrus much to think about meme. Dana here was reflecting on a Facebook post she made in 2010 where she said, what's on my mind? A lot of things. I wish they weren't. She said, Billy Ray Cyrus, much to think about. Me. And of course, because it's a photo of someone on the internet not smiling, someone, and I can't find an original source on this, Photoshopped it to make Billy Ray Cyrus smiling. A very funny place I saw it referenced is when someone realized that Billy Ray Cyrus is in Mulholland Drive, they said, I didn't realize that this guy from Mulholland Drive is Billy Ray Cyrus, much to think about. As a side note, you really have to wonder, what on earth did David Lynch and Billy Ray Cyrus have to talk about? I'm sure they talked about something, because David Lynch is such a weird guy. I'm sure he has some interest that overlaps with Billy Ray Cyrus's. But I just would love to eavesdrop on that conversation. And as you might expect, people often caption photos of themselves where they have a thoughtful look on their face with the caption, much to think about, like Annabella here, Carly, and this dog. I'm sure that there are more, but I could only search much to think about with Billy Ray also in the tweet, because if I just looked up much to think about, I wouldn't be able to tell if people were referencing the tweet or if they actually did just have much to think about. Obviously, the Billy Ray tweet is cringe. There's no denying that is a cringy thing for someone to post, but as people who have watched this channel long enough know, I'm post-cringe. Cringe is fine. The world would be a much better place if we were a little more cringy. Yes, is he attention-seeking by saying much to think about and not saying what he's thinking about? Obviously. But honestly, we all have much to think about a lot of times in our lives. Billy Ray has lived a much more complicated life than I, and I know he's done some crappy stuff of late that I did some research into when I did the what to heck tweet, and I honestly forgot all of it. But I know he has had more to think about in his life than I have. I've never had to worry about my daughter grinding up against Beetlejuice at the VMAs. Fall for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing if you want to get the weekly museum of not Twitter, where I cover a meme or a post that did not start on Twitter but is still big on the internet, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On April 20th, 2019, Vincent D'Onofrio tweeted, "Pigs can't look up, but I could pick a pig up one night and raise it into the sky and tilt this pig ever so gentle. I can make sure this pig's eyes line up with the stars. Imagine seeing the stars for the first time. I want to be treated that kindly and see the stars for the first time." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I'm recording this on Monday, and I have no idea what type of world I'm releasing it into, so I thought just to be safe, I should cover a very calm, serene, and beautiful tweet. And that's a hard thing to say about viral tweets. Most tweets that go viral are not calm, serene, or beautiful. But this tweet from actor Vincent D'Onofrio, who you know from many things, from Full Metal Jacket, Law & Order Criminal Intent, his various versions of playing Wilson Fisk throughout Marvel television, and of course his iconic role in Men in Black where he said such things as sugar water. He tweeted this beautiful thought about pigs and looking at stars for the first time. Now, a band-aid I want to rip off quickly is that there's really no evidence to suggest that pigs can't look up. They can't look up in the same 90-degree angle that people can. But for all intents and purposes, they can look up, and they definitely can see the stars if they try to. Friend of the show, Ellen Weatherford, actually discussed this in a video, and she makes a really good point about pigs in the Bahamas.
There is a colony of feral pigs that live in the Bahamas, and they're very comfortable getting in the water and swimming around. If they were unable to tilt their head up, they would not be able to keep their snout out of the water, and they would drown.
But Vincent D'Onofrio is right, that pigs can't have the full, unobstructed view of the stars that we humans do. And I think the sentiment is beautiful no matter how accurate it is. Because what he's describing is not literally a thing that happens to pigs. It's more poetic than that. It's about the feeling of not being able to access a certain emotion or an aspect of life and having someone else who can get you in touch with that. Because in some aspects of all of our lives, we are pigs, unable to tilt our heads up, and there can be someone, a person who comes into our lives who can pick us up and show us those stars, who can give us access to those feelings, those emotions those experiences that we otherwise would not be able to have. No one is completely fully rounded. We all rely on each other to be able to see all of the stars in the night sky. And so both sides of the exchange are rewarding and beautiful. It's beautiful to be shown another part of the night sky by someone else, and it's also beautiful to exchange the part of the night sky that you can see to someone else. The last sentence, I want to be treated that kindly and see the stars for the first time, resonates so strongly with me because I feel like that is the purest expression of love. Being able to show someone the stars in the night sky is like love. That is the exchange of one's whole self. I know I'm being highfalutin and taking this too seriously, but I don't know, this tweet's really beautiful to me. And apparently it was beautiful to book publishers because Vincent D'Onofrio actually made a children's book with illustrations by Shelley Cunningham called Pigs Can't Look Up. It's about a girl trying to find different ways to get a pig to look up so the pig can see the night sky. I didn't order it, so I don't know how it ends, but I imagine it ends with the pig seeing the night sky, and I'm sure it's beautiful. Multiple people in D'Onofrio's replies took it very literally and were being jackasses, saying things like a pig knows what the F a star is. And D'Onofrio replied, you have no art in you. It's just words. And honestly, if acclaimed actor Vincent D'Onofrio said that to me, I would disintegrate into dust. Also, someone says, you do realize that pigs can lay down and tilt their head to the side to look up, right? And D'Onofrio says, yet it cannot raise up to the sky, look it up. Pigs can lay on their side, and they can crane their necks up. However, they don't look up at the sky. Garrett, where did the poet in you go? You must find it once again. Now this is more encouraging, but I also would turn into dust if he said this to me. Multiple people compared D'Onofrio's tweet to the poem The Two-Headed Calf by Laura Gilpin, which goes, tomorrow when the farm boys find this freak of nature, they will wrap his body in newspaper and carry him to the museum. But tonight he is alive and in the north field with his mother. It is a perfect summer evening. The moon rising over the orchard, the wind in the grass. And as he stares into the sky, there are twice as many stars as usual. What both D'Onofrio and Gilpin get at is that there is something special about the idea of taking in the stars, and it's something that is like primal that we could even imagine farm animals would understand, and that would bring farm animals closer to being in concert with the breadth of the universe. I know that I'm talking like it's 420, the day that Vince D'Onofrio happened to tweet this, but I don't know, I think that there's special imagery going on here. And I do agree with what friend of my podcast, Preeti Chipper, said. Please let Kingpin do this monologue whenever Disney decides to bring Daredevil back. Just imagine it. Vanessa, pigs can't look up. A phenomenon that did happen on TikTok, I don't know how related it is to the Vincent D'Onofrio tweet, is that this poor woman made a TikTok pleading with people with pigs to show them the sky because she learned that pigs can't look up, and multiple people did it, and generally what happened is that the pig squealed like this. Or like this. So yeah, maybe you don't actually want to try to show pigs the sky, because they're mostly just mad that you're picking them up and not that focused on what's going on above them. But the tweet was never actually about literally doing that. It was about the metaphor. It was about the beauty of the poetry. And if you don't see that, you have no art in you. It's just words. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter but is popular on the internet nonetheless. Also, you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On June 28th, 2012, Horse eBooks tweeted, everything happened so much. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I really struggled to decide what tweet to do for the first one I'm recording after the 2024 election, where Donald Trump was elected president again. And I feel like this is the only one that's appropriate. It's the only one that sums up the feeling that we all share. Maybe not all of us. There are probably some people who are like, not enough is happening, MAGA, but I feel like people who are generally interested in this account probably feel like everything is happening so much. For a little background for my viewers who are not on Twitter in 2011, 12, and 13, Horse eBooks was an account that really fascinated people because it would tweet nonsense, sentence fragments, stuff like this. You can look it up on Wikipedia if you want a full lowdown, but basically, Horse eBooks started as an account from a Russian, spam farm. It was actually just one guy who had a bunch of different accounts, all tweeting out spam for ebooks. And Horse eBooks happened to be one of them. And in order to beat Twitter's spam filter, he would occasionally tweet bits of text from the ebooks, so it would make it look like it was an active account. To be clear, he wasn't literally typing this out himself. He was using some type of software to take sentences from ebooks and put it on Twitter automatically. So you'd get tweets like this. And sometimes they were profound, and sometimes they were just funny. Sometimes they were like a random shitpost. The main person who really started sharing them and made the account popular was John Hendren, who went by @fart. He started sharing them around, and Horse eBooks became like a staple of weird Twitter, despite not actually being a person technically. There was even a Tumblr dedicated to making comics out of Horse eBooks tweets. Now, a thing we learned in 2013 is that while the account originally did start the way I described, where it was random bits of text being posted by a Russian bot guy, It actually was acquired by a BuzzFeed employee named Jacob Bacala, who then tried to emulate that old style of auto-generated tweets as some sort of art project. I don't really understand it as an art project, but I don't understand a lot of art projects, and I've learned just to accept it. Do I think that somewhat diminishes the tweets that were made after he acquired the account? Of course I do. But this tweet was tweeted after he acquired it, and it's the most famous and I think most vital Horse eBooks tweet, so what do I know? Because the thing that this tweet captures, despite the fact that it is grammatically nonsense, everything happens so much doesn't actually make sense literally, but it captures the feeling that at all times, everything is happening and there's nothing we can do about it. That perhaps life would be bearable if everything was happening every so often, or if something was happening so much. But if everything is happening so much, it feels unbearable. I think in this day and age where everything is interconnected, where we're aware of everything, where we have so much access to tragedy, both interpersonal and international at all times, it feels like we want there to be a moment where we could just take a step back, where there would be a void, where nothing will be happening. But of course that's not possible, both because of the human condition, because there are always going to be things going on in our lives, and because, like I said, the interconnectedness of the world. Everything is always happening, and that feels unfair, I think. It brings to mind a line that Jeffrey Wright says in Wes Anderson's film from last year, Asteroid City, where he's giving a speech about, space travel and what have you, and it's humorous, but he ends the speech by saying this.
If you wanted to live a nice, quiet, peaceful life, you picked the wrong time to get born.
And the irony of this line, obviously, is that you don't get to choose when you're born, and so I think that that's what frustrates so many of us. And I don't even put myself in this category, because I'm one of those people who, I never really think that I'm born at the wrong time. I do a TikTok series about tweets. My skill set would not be valuable at any other time in human history. But I understand being can't things be calm? Can't we live in a scenario where only once or twice a year is there a world emergency that I need to really care about? Can everything happen a little less? And it feels particularly apt today, but it's felt particularly apt since it was tweeted. Someone on January 10th of this year said 2024 energy so far, which, if they only knew. Tyler Oakley has even quoted it where he says, I think of this tweet every time I live through another sentence that will be in history books. I know what you're talking about, Tyler. Feeling that right now. Liz says 10 years ago today, the entirety of human existence was brutally summed up in a mere 4 words. Yep, I agree. Everything happens so much, and it sucks. But I think, unfortunately, we have to accept it. And I know that that's not a thing anyone really wants to hear, but I don't think that we're ever going to go back to a time where everything doesn't happen so much. And I think that we need to learn how to regulate how we take things in and how we experience them. And I'm not saying that that's easy. I'm not saying I have an easy time of it. I'm not having an easy time of it right now. I really didn't want to do an episode tonight because I'm not feeling particularly funny or insightful. But I think if we don't learn how to take that everything and not be overwhelmed by it, then the only place we can go is cold nihilism and cynicism. And that, in my opinion, rots the soul. It rots one's ability to be kind to one another. And it makes you just not interesting to be around, honestly. I found this tweet from Select where they say, this tweet walks where everything everywhere all at once could run. And I think that that's both true because it sounds like the title. But I also think that that kind of is the thesis of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is, in case you couldn't tell by the speech I just gave, a movie I really love, because I think that that movie's thesis is that everything is happening all the time, and your choices are to become numb to it, or to accept it and control the things you can control, like love between one another. Look, I have no idea what the next several years are going to bring. I have no idea how many more everythings will be going on. I'm sure there will be a lot. But I know, and this is nothing I know from experience, I'm not an experienced organizer or anything, but I just know in my bones, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll die being proven wrong by this. But I know that people caring about one another in the face of everything happening so much is the only thing that has ever made positive change in the world in its history. And I think that there's actually some solace you can take in knowing that everyone is experiencing everything happening so much, just like you. It's not a unique thing to you, it's not your brain, it's not your life. Everything is happening so much to everyone. And the people who are not emotionally hurt by it, the people who are not sometimes stopped in their tracks by it, are people who are either too cynical to care, and honestly, screw those people, or people who are not paying attention, people who are detached, and also screw those people. I don't want to be those people. So as much as I hate the pain and uncertainty and fear I feel right now, I don't want to be any of the alternatives. This might be my last current events related one for a little bit, at least as the election's concerned. If there's something that comes up, I might do it. But I want to make it clear that if I start doing some silly ones later in the week, that's not because I lost sight of what's going on. I think that it is important for us to feel joy, and I also don't want to give those dudes the power over me to make me stop doing what I want to do. They don't deserve that. But like I said, I feel like this was the most appropriate tweet to do today, because this whole moment, above all else to me, feels overwhelming. It feels like no human was designed to take all of it in. And I don't think that we were. But I think maybe our shared humanity was designed to take it in. I don't know, maybe that's not true, but it sounds nice. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing if you want to get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 16, 2014, Kodak Black tweeted, "I support breast cancer." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Sometimes you say something where people can understand what you probably mean, but you didn't quite say it right, because I'm sure that rapper Kodak Black meant, "I support breast cancer treatment," or breast cancer awareness. But that's not what he wrote. He wrote that he supports breast cancer. But he also didn't just write that. He posted that with a photo of himself wearing a pink shirt and having something pink in his cup. Pink is the color of breast cancer awareness, so it wasn't a completely random choice, but just look at the photo and look at the caption. It just is so stupid. I feel like this tweet would not have gone as viral when people found it if he was making just a regular face in the photo. But he's not making a regular face in the photo. He's sort of like showing off his grills, and it's a dumb face. At the very least, it's not exactly the face you'd pair with a tweet raising awareness about breast cancer. Because even if the tweet was worded correctly and it said, "I support breast cancer research," this would still not be the photo I choose. For those who are unaware, Kodak Black is a rapper from Florida who blew up around 2015, 2016. So this tweet is actually from before he was famous in any way. In fact, he was only 17 when he tweeted this. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't tweeting insightful things when I was 17. I actually looked up to see what I tweeted on the day that I was exactly as old as Kodak Black is in this post, and it wasn't great. But it still wasn't me saying I support breast cancer. And like a lot of tweets from people who became famous later, this tweet wasn't found until several years after it was tweeted. I'm not sure if this is literally the first time it was referenced by someone, because I can't really search by the photo super easily. But I see on February 13th, 2018, someone named Algorithm tweeted, quote, "I support breast cancer, Kodak Black." That is the first time that it is officially referenced in text on Twitter, so I assume that around this time is when someone discovered it. But a crazy thing I found out when I was doing research for this, when I was trying to find the first example of someone referencing the Kodak Black "I support breast cancer" tweet, I found out that in 2017, Kodak Black released a limited edition t-shirt to raise money for breast cancer awareness. And this is, as far as I can tell, before anyone found that old tweet, before anyone was making jokes about Kodak Black supporting breast cancer. So despite the fact that we're clowning on him, it seems like he actually does care about breast cancer awareness. I don't know if someone in his family has breast cancer. It's basically impossible to search, because if you look up Kodak Black breast cancer, you're just going to get references to the tweet, but he seems to be about supporting breast cancer research. And that's not a one-time thing. In 2021, he donated a bunch of money and wigs and other supplies to breast cancer survivors. And to be clear, I am not trying to give Kodak Black the image of being a super great guy. I did read through the legal issues section on his Wikipedia page, and there's some stuff in there that, if true, means he's a super unsavory dude that I don't want to be showering plaudits on. But I do think it's accurate to say that he does support breast cancer survivors. And as a side note, I saw on the legal issues section of his Wikipedia page that he was in an anger management course with multiple other people, and the teacher of the course said he kept disrupting the class by burping regularly. And one, that's insane behavior. But also, how do you have so many burps in the chamber that you can burp so regularly that it's like a constant disruption? He definitely does need an anger management course, but he also needs a gut health management course, because that's not normal. The Kodak Black tweet is referenced a lot of times when breast cancer awareness comes up, like this person Chili Lemon quote tweeted a message about Breast Cancer Awareness Month with "I support breast cancer, Kodak Black." Robin jokingly asked, "I wonder what Kodak Black's stance on breast cancer is." When Megan the reporter was reporting on Tory Lanez's trial, and she said, "Regarding the jury with 2 women as alternates, the 12 deliberating jurors are 7 women and 5 men. 2 of the men are, like Lanes, wearing pink today." And Baptist Grizzy asked, "What if they all support breast cancer like Kodak Black? You never know." A thing I found very funny to be reminded of is when Dedicated Lettuce 2.0 compared when Vanessa Hudgens at the beginning of COVID said we need to respect the virus. He compared that to Kodak Black saying he respects breast cancer. But my absolute favorite reference is when someone referenced the Biggie was fat tweet, which I covered in episode 13, by saying, Lucky doesn't like SpongeBob, Kodak Black supports breast cancer, Joey is fat, except that at the end of the day, I only care about the music. I don't think I have a clever wrap-up or a lesson for this one, except to say, just proofread what you tweet, and make sure whatever you're tweeting means what you want it to say. And if you do accidentally tweet something like you support a disease that kills millions and millions across the globe every year, do some charitable work, do some donations to make up for it. It definitely does make up for it. No one actually thinks that Kodak Black is rooting for breast cancer to kill people. Although the face he's making in this photo implies he's not thinking about much of anything. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Consider subscribing if you want to get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, a show where I talk about something on the internet that blew up that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays.